Chapter 301. The three of them flew higher and higher in the fog. Lord Taoist Huayan waved his sleeves to block an immortal aura and asked Qin Shi with a frown, "Shoujing, are you sure? Why is it in the sky? Is it flying?" "It should be," Qin Shi said. "I also think it's strange. The position hasn't changed. It seems to be in the sky." As they were talking, Lord Taoist Jingha's divine sense found something. He said, "There's a mountain there." Qin Shi and Lord Taoist Huayan immediately understood. Qin Shi asked, "Master, is there anyone in the mountain?" Lord Taoist Jingha shook his head. "There are too many things in the mountain. My divine sense can't explore in detail in this fog." Although the divine sense of a nascent soul cultivator was much stronger and wouldn't easily get lost in this fog, the fog was so strange that divine sense couldn't play its original role. Qin Shi understood this but didn't say much. He just sighed. On second thought, he already knew where Mo Tiange was. What was there to be afraid of? Therefore he restrained himself and followed the two nascent soul Taoists. The lonely mountain finally appeared in their sight. Because of the fog, they could only see its rough outline. As soon as they approached the lonely mountain, Lord Taoist Jingha and Lord Taoist Huayan looked at each other and frowned. Lord Taoist Jingha whispered, Something's wrong. There are two people." Qin Shi didn't understand what he meant. He was happy and asked, "Master, did you feel it?" "Yes." Lord Taoist Jingha said absent-mindedly, "It's a bit strange." "What's strange?" Lord Taoist Jingha didn't answer this question. He shook his sleeves, and the flying magic tool suddenly sped up and flew to the top of the lonely mountain. Lord Taoist Huayan followed him without saying a word. The three of them flew close and hovered over the mountain. The top of the mountain was covered with spiritual herbs with pink ball-like flowers, swaying in the wind and exuding an intoxicating smell. Qin Shi looked down and saw soybean-sized beans under the spiritual herbs. They were densely stacked layer after layer and covered the whole mountain. The rocks were long gone. Heavenly aromatic beans. Until now, he felt an inexplicable panic in his heart. It seemed that something had happened without him knowing. When Lord Taoist Jingha and Lord Taoist Huayan saw the heavenly aromatic grasses all over the mountain, their expressions changed. But they didn't say anything. After a long silence, how could they say something like that before they were certain? Qin Shi's question startled Jing Xingji. If it was really Master Song Feng who brought Mo Tiange here, he remembered being restrained by Master Song Feng. In silence, the three of them descended to the peak. Beans, the flat mountaintop gradually became clear in the eyes of the three. He was still rational and tried his best to restrain himself, but before he could think of a way, the drug that filled the sky. He only thought it was a woman, so he tried to pull her clothes. Upon closer inspection, unexpectedly, it turned out she was still rational and resistant. Jing Xingji said he felt a headache and lost consciousness. In an instant, his heart was seized by panic. I didn't even get to look down at his body. Jing Xingji's words, these were the clothes of Qin Shi. Although he was half naked, he looked at him, but there was also a man's science. He was scared by his own memory. I don't want to kill you, but it seemed he did finally, but I also don't want those he wasn't in Shoujing's aromatic first. He really felt even though they were not hugging each other, even though there was no you've already shown mercy to me, thinking of not in their messy flashed were enough to Xingji's mind what had let's meet again. For a split second, nothing happened. She felt that there was nothing in his mind. He stood up, he had never imagined that he would see such a scene. Fortunately, what had happened, Master Song Feng really didn't care about the something happened to Mo Tiange, couldn't calm down, so he didn't pick up very cool and dash the ground. Otherwise, it would really be sure nothing happened. The two of them asked Jingha called for Jing Xingji saw his expression, and the treasures they let out in ran compared to ordinary flower balls of the heavenly aromatic grass. When his injuries recovered a little, his day went to pick up his clothes. At this moment, her eyes were closed tight and she was unconscious. Even if this so much he opened his mouth, all couldn't make it still hurt him. He suddenly began to hate himself. Now he only hoped that Mo Tiange's state of mind wasn't at that time. You still dared. In addition, Master Song Feng's mood was really terrible. He was furious if he had been more careful. If this person wasn't Jing Xingji, he could do was reach out his trembling hand. Master always said this person was the number one cultivator in the celestial pole. What happened then after he was neither human nor ghost. Lord Taoist Song wasn't normal when he retaliated a long time ago. Calm down. Sure enough, he was right. She didn't answer as he put on his clothes and carefully Lord Taoist woke in the dark closer. In the end, after regaining consciousness, the first thing she felt was a headache. Someone, a splitting headache. She was puzzled. You're awake. Who else would come here? A gentle voice came into her ear. How dare you? Was extremely high, and it was also shrouded in kind person. Unless she called out and she was come up burning with anger. Just as she was about to manage to impress it, Master Song's reaction wasn't chosen such a place. When he heard Lord Taoist Huayan's words, he waved his sleeve, and
when
as
she opened her
sister
eyes,
she was
person
better
she
than
saw was
Jing
indeed
Xingji's when she
firmly.
wakes up.
Seeing
Seeing
her
her
panic,
she
she
groaned,
groaned,
spat out
and
and comforted her blood and hissed out again.
but he
Don't
continued
be
to
afraid.
stare
at him without
It's
saying
okay now.
anything.
Jing had
You're
turned
safe
around
now.
and
Jing
called
felt
out.
the chill
His
run down
gentleness
his
calmed
spine.
Wuxia down.
He
I've
just
already
held him
said
over
that
when
I
she
haven't
recalled
questioned
what
her.
happened before
You're
she
not
fainted.
thinking of
She
killing
couldn't
me,
stay
did
down.
your anger?
Are you?
Stepped
Qing
forward,
she said
put his
coldly.
hand on
You
Qing's
didn't touch
shoulder.
her, but you were the one who took off her
Did I?
clothes. After a long time,
You can't blame me.
Qing's
Finally
knew what
moved,
she wanted to
and he
ask,
found that
so
there
he
were
hugged
tears
her
in his
without
eyes.
hesitation. He wiped
Nothing
them away,
happened.
took a deep
Don't
breath,
be afraid.
and tried to
I'm
suppress
here.
his emotions.
You'll be fine.
Master,
No.
I'm fine.
Because
Qing
of what
shook her head
happened,
in
he couldn't
despair.
let anything
You
happen
don't know
to
what
him.
happened. Seeing
Why?
that Qing she came
Master
back to
Song
his
Feng He,
senses, Lord
Jing
Daoist
Xingji.
Jinghe breathed a
She
sigh
was
of
almost
relief and said
incoherent.
gently, "It's
I
good
know,
that
I
you
know.
understand." Qing she
Don't
hugged
worry.
her tightly and
Jing is
comforted
fine.
her. It
I
should
know
be
what you're
because of the
saying.
drug.
Don't be afraid.
She'll wake up in a while.
It's really okay. You're fine.
Qing she
Nothing
lowered his
happened.
head and answered,
Feel it, isn't it?
carefully pulling Mo Chenga's
Such
clothes.
comforting
and hugging comforted
During this
Mo
process,
Chenga. He didn't look at Jing Xingji next
She
to him.
listened to him and
Lord
felt that her
Daoist
clothes
Jinghe
were
paused
intact
and
and there was nothing
tentatively,
wrong with her body.
"What are you going to do?"
Then she slowly
"If you
calmed
want to
down
kill
and
this
muttered
boy,
to
I'll
herself,
do it now." No, nothing
A
happened.
murderous
aura flashed
Nothing.
in Qing's
Yes,
eyes,
nothing.
but he
Nothing
suppressed it in
happened.
the end. Qing
No
she
need.
patted her back
I still
and
have
repeated
something to
softly,
ask him.
If
Mo
I want to
Chenga's
kill
mood
him, I'll do
gradually
it myself.
eased from his gentle voice.
All right. She leaned on his
Lord
shoulder and
Daoist
tried to
Jinghe
calm
was
down.
silent for a while.
After a long time,
He
she
looked at
finally
him and
felt that
Chenga,
everything was
and a
true.
meaningful light
Nothing
flashed in his
terrible really
eyes.
happened to her. He asked
She
slowly,
finally returned
"What do
to
you
normal
think
and asked,
after this happened?"
"Senior Marshal Brother,
Qing she
how
sat
did you find
blankly
this
for a
place?
while and seemed to
I
hear
thought
what
you
Lord
and
Daoist
Master couldn't
Jinghe
find
said.
me."
When she
He
was
held
brought
the
here by
unconscious
Master
Mo
Song
Chenga
Feng
in his
and
arms
fed
and
with
said
heavenly
faintly,
aromatic beans,
"Master, what do
her
you
heart
want to
was
hear?"
full of despair. Lord
She
Daoist
fervently
Jinghe
hoped
couldn't
that
say it
Master
for a
and
while,
him would come
so
to
he
save
thought
her,
about it and
but
changed
even
his
when she
words.
lost her mind,
"You
they still
don't
didn't
care?"
come.
Qing
Feeling
she
her
clenched
trembling,
his fists
Qing
as if
she
he was
hugged her
trying his
tighter
best
and
to
hated
suppress
Master Song
himself.
Feng even
But
more
after
in
a
his
while,
heart.
he still couldn't
Mo
suppress
Chenga had
himself,
always been
so he
very
suddenly
courageous,
slapped his
but this
palm
time
down.
she was so scared.
His spiritual
It
aura
could be
was
imagined
turbulent,
how frightened
tearing
and
all the
desperate she was
heavenly
at that
aromatic
time.
grasses around
It
him
was
to
Master who
pieces.
thought of a way.
How could
He
I
didn't
not
mention
care?
that he used his blood
He
essence
said
and
through
only
clenched
said,
teeth,
"We found
glaring
this place.
fiercely at Jing Xingji,
Fortunately,
not
you're
far
fine.
from him.
I wish
Did
I
you
could
guys
kill
save
him
me in
and tear him
time?"
into pieces.
No.
I
When
want to
we
grind
arrived,
Master
you and
Song
Jing
Feng's
Xingji
bones
were
into
already
ashes
unconscious.
even more.
Seeing
But
that
doing
her
that
mood
will
had
only let me
returned to
vent my
normal,
hatred.
Qing she told
Things
her
have
in
already
detail
happened.
what he saw when he
If
arrived.
Chenga wakes up, she'll
He
definitely
especially
be the one
explained that
suffering
only
the
her
most.
outer clothes were
So
torn,
you don't mind?
but her undergarments
Qing
were
she didn't
intact,
answer
and there was
this
a
question.
distance between her and
He
Jing
closed his
Xingji's.
eyes and shook his
Mo
head.
Chenga listened to him
Master,
one by
don't ask
one,
me.
lost in
My
thought.
mind is in a
When
mess right
Qing
now.
she finished, she asked, "Did you see anyone else besides
Chapter
us?"
302. No.
Qing she
This
never
question
thought such a
puzzled
thing would
Qing
happen
Shi.
one day.
He said,
From the
Jing
day
Xingji
Yi
said
entrusted
someone
his
seemed to have
daughter
knocked
to
him
him
out.
more than 80
Do you
years
still
ago,
remember?
Mo Chenga's
Mo
safety was
Chenga
his
slowly
responsibility.
recalled.
At
When
that
he
time,
returned
Nian
from
Wushan
demonic
showed
mountain
mercy
injured,
to her. He sent
she didn't
Yi
actually
Jingwen to the
swallow those
secular
heavenly
world to pick up
aromatic
the little
beans,
girl,
but some juice flowed
Unfortunately,
into her body,
uncle
so she
Yi
was
Jiang
affected.
chose to escape
After
with
feeding
her.
them heavenly
At that
aromatic
time, he
beans,
thought it was the Yi
Master
family's
Song
own
Feng
choice.
laughed and walked
In
away.
that case, he
She
didn't
wanted to
violate
save
his
them by
oath,
herself,
so he didn't need
but
to worry
she
about
finally
it.
spat out all
Therefore,
the heavenly
during those
aromatic
10 years,
beans
he
in her
never
mouth.
looked for the whereabouts
She didn't
of the
know what
uncle and
Master
nephew.
Song Feng did
Later,
to her
when he
body,
met her in
but her
Yunhu's sect
cultivation
and
level
discovered
was
that she was
restricted
the little
and her
girl
mind
from
was
back
also
then,
affected.
he thought he still
She was in a
couldn't
daze
escape
and
this
couldn't use her
responsibility.
strength.
Since
Then
he
Jing
met her
Xingji
again for
pounced on her and
Yihan's
stole her
sake,
clothes.
he had to protect her in
She
the
resisted
future.
desperately.
Then he would
but
take
when
her
she
back
thought
to
she couldn't
Shinjing's
escape,
school and
her
let his
strength
master
suddenly
accept her as
disappeared.
his disciple.
She couldn't hold
He
on
would watch her
anymore
grow
and
up
passed
step
out.
by step, and he
Right.
would be moved little
She
by
suddenly
little.
remembered that
The
before
current
she
Mo
passed
Chenga
out,
was
she
no
seemed
longer
to
the
have
little
heard a
girl
sigh.
from back then.
That voice
She
was
was
a bit
already
familiar.
a core formation
She grabbed
cultivator
Qing Shi's
and had
clothes
grown
and
to the
said,
point where
"It's
she had
Nia
the
Wuxian.
strength to protect
She
herself.
saved me."
He also thought he
Nia
could
Wuxian?
finally change his
Who was
identity
she?
from her protector
Nia
to her
Wuxian
lover.
is Master Song
But he never
expected
that the reality would be so cruel,
and she was also
he
the
just
one who
wanted
led
to change his
Master
identity,
here.
and she, who he had protected for so many
Thinking
years,
of Nye
was hurt
Wuxiang,
like this.
Mo Tiange
Why
didn't
did this
know
happen?
whether she should
He
hate
didn't
her
need to
or be
think too
grateful.
much to guess the reason.
Master Song Feng
Master
was led
Song
here
Feng
by
hated
her,
him and his
but in the
master.
end, she was able
He
to
happened to
survive
meet
because
Mo
she
Tiange
extended a
alone,
helping
so he
hand.
retaliated on
Qin
her.
Shi listened to her
If it
slowly
weren't for
talk
them,
about what
Master
happened
Song
after
Feng
the two of
wouldn't
them
even
were
look at a little
separated,
core
as well
formation
as something she
cultivator,
still remembered.
let alone come up
In
with
the
such
end,
a
she
sinister
said,
idea.
"It should be Nye
For so
Wuxiang."
many years,
She
so
came
many
back
years,
later and knocked
he
Jing
always thought
Xingji
he was her
unconscious.
protector.
But
He
he
didn't
recognized her
expect that the
voice.
pure Yin constitution
Qin
he
was
worried
silent
about
for a
didn't
moment,
bring
then
disaster
said,
to her.
"Fortunately,
In the end, she
Master
suffered this
Song
kind of
Feng
thing
really
because
deserved
of him.
it. Boy,
If
you
he
don't
didn't
have to
treat his
blame
disciple
yourself.
like that, how
Hearing
could
his
this Miss
master
Nye
take
voice
the risk
he
to
smiled
save you?
sadly and
In
said
my
softly,
opinion, when you
rest
escaped
assured,
from the
master,
fog with her, she
I know what
reported
to
it to
do.
her master.
I just didn't
You really
expect
don't have
Master
to blame
Song
yourself
Feng to come up with
Lord
such a
Daoist
shameless
Huayan
idea.
said with a faint smile.
He paused for a
Qingwei's
moment, then
primordial
continued,
yin is still
even
there,
if she also
which
had
means
a
the
part
thing
in
you
this
worried
matter,
about
she
didn't
saved
happen.
you after all.
Qin Shi
If we
suddenly
meet her
looked
in
up
the
at Lord
future, we
Daoist
should be
Huayan
lenient.
and then at his master.
Mo Tiange
The
nodded,
two
then
nascent
sighed.
soul Lord Daoists
She's also
both
a
had
pitiful
smiles on their
person.
faces, which
Master
didn't seem
Song
fake.
Feng didn't treat her like a
Master,
disciple.
he cast a
Even if she
pleading
was a
gaze
servant,
towards
he
Lord
wouldn't
Daoist
treat her
Jing.
like this.
Martial Uncle
Qin Shi
Huayan
smiled, then
is
bent
what he
down
said
and hugged
true.
her tightly. Lord
I'm
Daoist
just glad
Jingha
that you're really
smiled.
okay.
Of course it's
After
true.
the disaster,
Otherwise,
this kind of
I
hug
would have
made
already killed
Emochenga
this
feel
brat.
very satisfied.
Why would I still ask
The two
you?
of them hugged for a while.
That's
Then
right.
she suddenly asked,
With Master's
Senior
violent
Marshal
personality,
Brother,
if something like this had
really
happened to his
what would you
disciple,
do?
even if
Jing
she
Xingji
didn't
had
let
been
go of
tricked,
her,
so
he would definitely
Emochenga
kill him
couldn't
to vent
see
his
his
anger.
anger.
How
After
could he
a
still
while,
be so
she
calm?
only heard him say,
He was
"Of
the
course
one
I'd
who
tear
became
Master
excited
Song
when he
Feng
saw
into
the scene in
pieces."
front of him, so he
This wasn't
naturally
the
thought.
answer Emochenga
Chenga
wanted
was in
to
the
hear,
same
so
realm
she
as him
asked
now.
again,
What
he
about
couldn't see
me?
whether her
Would you still
primordial
want
being
me?
was still there or not.
This time,
but
Qin
his
Shi
master
didn't
answer
answer
for a
for a
long
long
time.
time.
It was so long
Realizing
that
this,
Emochenga felt
Qin Shi was
disappointed.
ecstatic for a
Then
moment,
she heard him
then
chuckle
angry
and let
for a
go of
moment.
her. He shouted,
He looked her in the eyes
"Master,
and said
did you
with
do this on
incomparable
purpose?
sincerity,
Lord
no
Daoist
matter what you
Jingha
look
burst
like
into
or what
laughter
happened to
and
you,
said
you're
complacently,
Chenga.
"Brat,
I
no
love
matter
you,
how
so
smart
I
you are,
absolutely
you
won't
still a
abandon
layman when
you."
it comes to this kind
This
of
was the
thing.
first time he said
Master
he
could
loved
tell
her.
at a glance.
Although none of these things
Qin
happened,
Shi wanted to
although
get
it was
angry,
just a
but
promise,
after experiencing the
Emochenga felt
misunderstanding,
she was
just
just
willing
willing
to
to believe
believe
the
him
truth.
and believe he
He
didn't
only
lie.
felt incomparably happy.
Even though he was ridiculed by Lord
Chapter
Daoist
304.
Jingha, he couldn't
most
make an
dangerous
angry
place on
expression,
demonic
so his
mountain
face
was
twisted.
Immortal's ruins.
On the side,
and the most
Lord
mysterious
Daoist Huayan
place in
stroked
Immortal's
his beard
ruins
with
was
his
Jade
smile.
Palace.
He also
The
thought
two
it
of
was
them
very
talked about their
interesting.
feelings after
However,
they
he was
parted.
more like a
When
senior than Lord
Emochenga heard
Daoist
Lord
Jingha.
Daoist Jingha
After
went to
laughing
Jade
for a
Palace,
while,
she
he
asked
said,
about it.
"Senior Marshal
Qin Shi
Brother
said,
Jingha,
Jade
since
Palace
Qingwei
is
is
said
said
to
to
be
be the
the
immortal
immortal
residence where
we should go to
immortals
Jade
rested
Palace
during
to
the
meet
great
them.
war between immortals and demons."
Lord Daoist
So the
Jingha
fallen
stopped
immortals
laughing
were
and
buried
said to Qin
nearby,
Shi
forming
seriously,
immortals' ruins. There
Jade
are many
Palace is
relics
too
left by
dangerous,
immortals
so it's
in
not
Jade
convenient
Palace.
for me to take you
Although
there.
most of them are
Since
damaged
Jenga
and
is
some of them
fine,
are
I'll
too
leave the
dense
rest
for
to you.
cultivators like us to use,
Qin
there are
Shi
also
knew
some
the trip to
strange
Jade
things.
Palace was
If you
very
get them,
important
it'll
to
be
his
a great
master.
fated chance.
His master had been stuck in the
Emochenga knew
peak
a
of the
little
middle
about
stage
this,
of the
but it
nascent
seemed a
soul
bit
realm for
unusual
many
this
years
time.
and hadn't had a chance
Aside
to
from Jade
advance.
Palace,
He
there are
came
also
to
many
demonic
treasures
mountain
in
this
other
time
places
because
on
there were
demonic
precious
mountain,
treasures
right?
in Jade Palace.
Why did
and
all the
Immortal's
nascent
ruins.
soul cultivators go
Master,
to Jade
don't worry.
Palace this time? When Chenga wakes
Qin
up,
Shi said
we'll
with
go
a smile.
find her father's
Naturally,
remains and
they
go
got
back.
some news that there
We
are
won't
rare
stay here
treasures
for
in
long.
Jade Palace.
It's good that
At
you know
this
what to
point,
do.
a trace of
This
doubt
time,
appeared
the
in his
restrictions
eyes,
on
and he said
demonic
with
mountain are
uncertainty,
unstable.
Master
So it's
told
not
me
good
that a
to stay here
treasure
for
appeared
long.
in the Jade Palace
Lord
last time.
Daoist Jingha paused,
Four
took
nascent
out
soul
several things
cultivators
from
like
his
them,
robe and
it might
handed
be
them
able
to
to
him.
break through in one go.
There's not
so
much
this time,
time, many
and
Chenga
nascent soul
hasn't woken up
cultivators
yet,
want to
so
go
I
to the
won't
Jade
take you
Palace
out.
to try their luck.
I've marked the path just now.
It's actually such
Just
a treasure.
follow the compass and you won't
Emochenga
get
was
lost
very
again.
surprised.
Yes,
The
master.
higher one's cultivation
Qin Shi
level
took
was,
these things
the
and put them
fewer
away
treasures
without
that could
any
advance
nonsense.
one's cultivation
In addition
level.
to the compass,
So most
there
nascent
were
soul
several magic
cultivators were
weapons
stuck
in
in
the
the
early
talismans,
stage of
all
nascent
of which
soul.
were his
A
master's
few
treasures.
entered the middle stage
He
of
just
nascent
used his
soul,
blood essence
and
to
very
protect
few
himself.
entered the late stage of
After
nascent
thinking
soul.
for a while, he
There
asked
were only
again,
4 or 5
Master,
in the
is
entire
Master
celestial
Song Feng
pole in the
also
past
going to
thousands
Jade
of years.
Palace?
Many
Lord
nascent
Daoist
soul
Jingha's
cultivators
face
reached
darkened.
the peak of their realm
Most
after
likely.
hundreds of years
What
of
else can catch
cultivation
his
but
eye
lacked
except
fated
Jade
chances
Palace?
to advance.
He sneered.
Their master, Lord Daoist
Chenga
Jingha,
is fine,
was
but this
the
is
same.
definitely his
If it
plot.
was really such a
If
treasure,
I meet him again,
it was
I'll
no
have to
wonder
settle
so many
accounts
nascent
with
soul
him.
cultivators
Senior
went to Jade
Marshal
Palace.
Brother Jingha.
Yes. Lord
As
Daoist
Qin Shi
Huayan
spoke,
frowned
he then
worriedly.
shook his head.
Master
But it's
Song
hard to
Feng is
say.
indeed powerful.
Such a treasure
I'm
already
afraid the
appeared
two of
last
us are
time.
no match for
How
him,
could it be
right?
so coincidental
What are
that
you
it
afraid
appeared
again this time? I'm a bit
Lord
worried about
Daoist
Master's
Jingha
trip.
said faintly.
We're not
Chenga
the only
nodded,
ones who
feeling a
want
bit
to
heavy.
deal with him. With so
There'll
many
always be
nascent
an
soul
opportunity.
cultivators, if there was a
Lord
conflict,
Daoist Huayan was
but with
speechless.
Master's strength,
He thought
it
for a
shouldn't
while
be
and
difficult
nodded
for
with a
him to
sigh.
stay alive.
He had a grudge
The
against
two of them
Master
pondered
Song
each other
Feng.
for a while. Then
Even if
Qin
this
Shi
didn't
said,
happen, he would
Master
still
knows
fight
what
with
he's
him.
doing, so we
What
don't
was
need
there
to
to
worry
be
about
afraid
him.
of?
It's
Master,
getting late.
it's dangerous
Let's
on demonic
retrieve your
mountain.
father's remains
You
and
and
get out
Marshal
of here
Uncle
as soon as
Huayan should
possible.
protect yourselves first.
Yes. As for Master Song
Emochenga stood
Feng
up and pondered for a
Qin
moment.
Shi's face was
She
full
then
of
lowered
killing
her
intent.
head to look at the
After
heavenly
this trip,
aromatic
I'll
herbs
advance
that
to
the nascent soul realm, and I'll deal with him sooner or later.
Since we've encountered them,
why don't we take some of these
have
patted him on the shoulder and laughed. It'll
You're
be
ambitious.
easier to exchange for the
indeed my
chalcedony.
disciple.
Chin, she
I'm
stared
not
at
as
these
strong as
heavenly
him,
aromatic
but all my
beings and
disciples
recalled
are
what
better
she
than
almost
him.
experienced.
Chin, she smiled.
He felt displeased
Master,
and said, "You and
what do you
Marshal
want them
Uncle Hawaiian
for?
should go quickly.
I found the
It'll
chalcedony.
be too late if you don't go now." The two of
And
them had only been
Lord
apart for
Taoist
such a
Jing
short
rolled
period
his
of
eyes,
time,
and
glanced
he
at
already
Jing
had a
Xingji, who was
chalcedony?
seriously injured
From
by
inside
him,
his
and asked,
robe,
"What
Chin,
about
she
this
took
boy?
out the Shen Fire
What are you
Jade
going to
essence.
do?"
It was
Chin, she
sparkling,
glanced at Jing
translucent,
Xingji,
and
who
about the
vomited
size of
blood
2
after being
palms.
beaten by Lord
Where did you
Taoist
get such a
Jinghe,
good
and said
chalcedony?
faintly,
Mo
"There are some
Chinga was
things I have to
pleasantly
ask him."
surprised
as she took the
All right.
chalcedony. Lord
This
Taoist
kind of
Jinghe
chalcedony
knew he
was
had
at least
an
several
idea, so
thousand
he
years
didn't care
old.
anymore.
Furthermore,
In the end,
it didn't
he
have
said,
the slightest
"Go out
trace
as
of
soon as
impurities.
possible."
It was
Don't stay
definitely
too
a
long.
high-quality
Chin,
chalcedony.
she nodded and
More
watched him and
importantly,
Lord
there was
Taoist
enough
Huayan take
chalcedony.
out their flying
Even
magic
if he
weapons
failed,
and
he
leave
could
together.
refine it again.
When the figures
she
of the two
smiled.
nascent soul
The
Lord
one in
Taoists
Feng Duo
disappeared,
from Biyun
Chin,
Sect
she
gave
looked
it
at
to
the
me.
scene in front
In
of
the
him
end,
and
it
couldn't
was
help
for
but
Master's
feel
sake.
angry.
Although
Although
it
it
didn't
didn't
really
raise her
happen,
head and
the
smiled.
scene in front of him showed
Master's
that Jing
reputation
Xingji
is
definitely
really
took
valuable.
advantage of Tiange.
Such a big chalcedony
Thinking of
can't
this,
be
he
bought
couldn't
outside.
help but want to hit
Jing
Jing
Xingji
Xingji.
also smiled.
But Jing Xingji
This is
had some
great.
friendship with
Your
him,
heaven and
and
earth
he
fan
needed
can
an
finally be
explanation from
refined,
him,
so he could
and
only endure it for
the
now.
other materials
He
had
looked
long
down
been
at Tiange.
prepared.
She was
They
still
also found the
unconscious.
Chiyun stone,
He
and
felt
now
her
they
pulse
also
and
had the
checked her
1,000-year-old
condition.
Indeed,
as
they
Master
could
said,
refine
she wasn't
magic
injured.
weapons after
It was
returning from
probably
demonic
because of
mountain.
the drug that she
Emo
hadn't
Chenga
woken
put
up
the
yet.
chalcedony into
He
her
thought for a
Chenkuin
moment,
bag.
picked up
The
Chenga's
two of them
clothes
rested
and put
for a
them on
while,
her.
then summoned
Only
their
now
flying
did he
magic
understand
weapons,
Lord Dao's
planning to
Jing
leave
his
lonely
meaning.
peak.
Chenga's
The two of
outer
them
clothes
flew
weren't
into the
there,
air,
but her
Qin
underwear
she
was
stood
still
on the
intact.
flying cloud and looked down at
Obviously,
the
she wasn't
heavenly
violated.
aromatic beans that
Sure
covered
enough,
the entire
Master
mountain.
had sharp eyes and
He
found the
frowned
key
and raised
point
his
at a
hand.
glance. Fire
As for
spiritual
Qin,
aura
he
gathered
lost
in
his
his
sense of
palm,
propriety as
forming
soon
a
as he saw
fireball.
the scene in front
With
of
a
him.
wave of his hand,
But this was too
the fireball
strange.
fell on the
If
mountain
Master
peak and burst
Song
into
was
flames.
determined to make Chenga
Upon
lose her
seeing this,
chastity,
Emo Chenga
why did he
shouted,
leave her and
"You're
Jing
burning
Xingji
all
here?
of them?"
There were
These
heavenly
aromatic
aromatic
grasses
herbs
have been
everywhere.
rooted here for
If
a
the two
longer
of them
time
were
than
really
the spiritual
affected,
plants in
why
her
did the two of
virtual
them
sky
pass out
world.
here in the end?
Wouldn't it be a
Did
pity
an
to
accident
burn them?
happen, or were they
Qin
stopped
she
by
snorted.
others? Of course,
Keeping them
it
was
was also
a
possible
scourge.
that everything was
These
wrong.
things might be useful to others, but
After
for
all,
him,
they
Master
were really
Song Feng's
unpleasant
involvement
memories.
was just their guess.
Emo Chenga thought
Just
about
as he
it and
thought
felt
up
he
to
was
this
right.
point, he heard a
Without
groan.
these heavenly
He looked up
aromatic
and saw
herbs,
Jing
she
Xingji
wouldn't have
moving
almost
his hands and
experienced
feet.
such a
He
terrible
woke up.
thing. So she
Jing
didn't say
Xingji felt
anything.
his head hurt,
The
and his
fire
chest
grew
hurt
bigger
even
and
more.
bigger,
He
engulfing
knew he
the
was
entire
injured,
peak.
but he didn't know what
Soon,
happened.
all the heavenly
He closed his
aromatic
eyes
herbs
and
were
gasped for
burned,
breath for a
and the
while.
heavenly aromatic
When he felt
beans
his
in the
breathing
fire
was a
made
bit
crackling
smoother,
sounds.
he opened his
Seeing
eyes
that
with
all the
difficulty.
heavenly aromatic
The moment
herbs were
he opened
burned,
his eyes,
Qin
he was
she held her
startled.
in his arms. Qin she was sitting
Let's
not
go.
far away,
Emo
holding
Chenga
Emo
nodded.
Chenga and
It was
staring at
good
him
to burn
coldly
them all.
with cold eyes.
Burning them made her
Although
feel better.
Qin she had never
She
been
didn't want
friendly
to
to
recall
him,
that memory.
his gaze carried
By the
a
way,
hint of
where's
anger.
Jing Xingji?
Then he realized
She
something
suddenly
was
thought
wrong
of
with
this
his body,
question.
so he lowered his head and scared himself
Qin,
again.
she said faintly,
He was actually
I told him to
half-naked.
go first.
He looked down
Jing
and glanced
Xingji
at
opened
Emo
his mouth
Chenga
and found his
I
voice
think
was
you'll be
extremely
unhappy to
hoarse.
see him. He gulped, then
Emo
asked,
Chenga was
what
touched.
happened? She
Qin,
really
she
didn't want to
sneered.
see Jing Xingji
Don't you
again.
remember?
It was hard for
His
him to
tone
even
made
think
Jing
of this.
Xingji frown.
The two of them
He
followed
looked
the
at his
feng shui
half-naked
compass
appearance,
left by
then
Lord
looked at
Daoist
Qin Shi's
Jingha and
posture of
smoothly went
protecting
out
him
of
of
the
the
fog.
Chenga.
Lord
Suddenly,
Daoist
some
Jingha
memories
once said
flashed
they
in
were
his
in the
mind,
depths
and
of
he was
immortals'
greatly
ruins.
shocked.
There were too many dangers,
Seeing that
and
Jing
wasn't a
Xingji
place
seemed
core
to
formation
remember something,
cultivators
the
like them
anger
should
in
come
Qin
to.
Shi's heart
Qin
intensified.
Shi also knew this, so
He
he
stared
took
at
Emo
Jing
Chenga
Xingji
back to
coldly
tens
but
of
didn't
thousands
say a
of feet
word.
peak. Under
A day
his
later,
gaze,
after
Jing
several
Xingji
close
wanted to
calls,
defend himself,
the two of them
but he
finally
felt he had
returned to their
nothing to
original
say.
route.
Say he had
Qin
no
Shi
choice.
breathed a sigh of
Things
relief.
had already happened,
There aren't
and
any
he already
demonic
knew what
beasts
this
here.
junior martial
If we're
sister meant
careful,
to
we
Qin
should be able
Shoujing.
to reach our
What was the
destination
point
in
in
half a
saying this?
day.
After a
Emo
long
Chenga
time,
was
he
a
said,
little excited
if you
when
want
she
to
thought
kill
of
me,
their
I have
destination.
nothing to say. She nodded. So, you
And
also think you deserve to die?
the two of them walked along the
Of
rocks
course
and
not.
entered a dense
Jing
forest.
Xingji looked up
Be
and
careful.
said, I don't think
Qin
I
Shi
did
said,
anything wrong.
This is bone
I didn't want to
eroding
do
wood.
this.
Just
Although
I
it will
like
make you
beauties,
rot into a
I'm
pile
not
of
interested
bones
in
in
other
an instant.
people's women.
Emo
However,
Chenga was
things
shocked.
have already happened,
Its
and I don't
toxicity
want
is
to
so
shirk
strong.
any
If we
responsibility.
take it out,
If you want to kill me to
we
vent
fight
your
against
anger,
enemies?
I have nothing to say.
Qin Shi shook
Of course,
his head.
I will not fight
We
back.
can't take it out. Although the
After a
toxicity
moment
of
of
this
silence,
bone-eroding
Qin Shi
wood is
said,
strong,
"You didn't
it
want to?"
disappears very quickly.
Yes, we ran into
After
Master
it's
Song
unearthed,
Feng.
its
He
toxicity
hated
will
you and your
completely
master,
disappear
so
in
he
about a
vented his
day.
anger on your
Putting it
junior
in a
martial
jade box
sister.
won't work. He brought us here and fed
I
us
see.
heavenly aromatic
The two of
beans,
them
so
propped up their
what Jing
protective
Xingji
spiritual
said was
aura,
consistent with their
released their
guesses.
defensive magic
However,
weapons,
from what
and
he
cautiously
said, it
entered
seemed
the
that he
forest.
didn't know what
This
happened
way.
in the end. Qin Shi
What was
led the
going
way,
on?
flying close to
Qin
the
Shi was
ground.
confused.
The area of this bone-eroding wood was quite large. The two of them were afraid of touching the leaves, so it took them a long time to get out of the forest. After passing through the forest of bone-eroding wood, the scenery in front of them changed. The sky was dark and the ground was full of holes of various sizes. Some of the holes were still burning, making the surroundings look dark red. Emo Chenga looked around and asked, "Why does this place look like this?" These holes were too small, so they obviously weren't volcanoes, but there were so many of them, which was really strange. Qin Shi said, "These are traces left by ancient immortals who used fire magic." Fire spell? Emo Chenga stared at the endless ruins, yearning in her heart. What kind of powerful spell would be able to leave behind such a huge trace? Maybe these things were only done casually by an ancient immortal. Let's go. This way.
Qin once again summoned his flying cloud. He pulled Mo Tiange, floated in the air and slowly flew to the right. In the bone-eroding wood forest they could only fly close to the ground, but above these holes they could only fly high. These were fire elemental spells left behind by the immortals. They were not something that the three great true fires of today could compare to. Although the three great true fires were powerful, they were mortal fires. These were immortal fires. If the immortal cultivators were to face them, they would definitely not be able to withstand it. After flying for a while, they still hadn't flown out of the ruins, so Qin suddenly descended. "Senior Marshal Brother?" Mo Tiange called out. "Where are we going?" Qin said firmly, "It's down there." Mo Tiange looked down, but there were only several dazzling holes below, and there was no other place to go. While she was feeling bewildered, Qin's flying cloud was still descending, flying into one of the holes.
Senior Marshal brother. This was an immortal fire. If it burned them, they wouldn't be able to bear it. She held her hand and comforted her. It's okay. Don't worry. Just as the flying cloud was about to touch the immortal fire in the hole, it suddenly flew over the immortal fire and crashed into the wall of the hole. The flying cloud was extremely fast. Just as it was about to crash into the wall, Chinga saw a cave on the wall, and the flying cloud flew into the cave in an instant. We're here. She withdrew the flying cloud, looked at the cave and sighed. It's been more than 80 years. I didn't expect to come back here again. Chinga glanced around. Although the entrance of the cave was very small, the inside of the cave was very spacious. She was surrounded by dark red rock walls which looked terrifying. Is this the place where my father died? Chinga couldn't help but walk inside. After walking for a while, she stopped. At the bottom of the cave there was a stone platform. On the stone platform lay a withered skeleton. Scattered clothes hung on the body, and it was clean without any flesh, leaving only white bones. Chinga couldn't move her eyes away from this skeleton. She slowly moved until she reached the stone platform and gently knelt down. Father, I finally get to see you? Although it was just a skeleton and she couldn't see any traces of her father, Chinga still couldn't help but cry. She remembered many things. Her lonely childhood, her sick mother, the days when she and her mother depended on each other for survival. At that time, she longed for her father to come back and live happily with her family. But he didn't come back even when her mother passed away. At that time, it wasn't that she didn't hate her father, but she always thought that maybe her father also had his own difficulties. It wasn't that he didn't come to pick her up, but he definitely had other things to do. She guessed the result correctly, but she didn't guess the reason correctly. It wasn't that her father didn't come to pick her up because he had other things to do, but he died here. Before he died, he entrusted her to the only person he could trust. Unfortunately, due to a strange combination of factors, she wandered from place to place for 10 years. Finally, the person he entrusted her to found her, sheltered her for several decades, and even became her lover. She gently knelt down beside her. Brother Yi, this is probably the last time I'll call you Brother Yi. Today I came here because Chinga came to collect your remains, and I also came to give you an explanation. I've done what I promised you all these years. Chinga has already grown up and become a core formation cultivator. My responsibility has finally come to an end today. He turned to look at Chinga, smiled and held her hand tightly. He then continued to say, Brother Yi, that day you said that if your daughter had a pure Yin constitution and spiritual roots, I'd be in charge of dual cultivation. I'm well aware of what you're implying. Although today's result is the same, I want to make it clear to you that Chinga and I love each other, so this has nothing to do with you. Can rest assured. Chapter 305. After a simple ceremony with Chinga, Chinga apologized to the skeleton and put it into the jar she prepared one by one, preparing to take it back to the secular world and bury it with her mother. When she was traveling in the foundation building realm, she wanted to go back to the family's village. At that time she had already entered the territory of Jin, but she was attracted by the spiritual aura fluctuation of Ziwei's Immortal's cave. It had been 76 years since she went back. 76 years. Her grandparents and uncles must have turned into skeletons and Tianjun and the others must have died, right? She didn't know if her mother's grave was taken care of. In a few days, she planned to go back to the Mo family's village in Jin to move her mother's remains and second uncle's ashes back to the Yi family's ancestral grave. After putting away her father's remains, Chinga looked up and carefully looked at the cave they hid in. The rock walls were illuminated by the immortal fire, which was very hot. Did you hide here? She crouched down and poked the corner with the 3-yang real fire sword as if he was looking for something. When he heard her voice, he answered, When the restrictions on Demonic Mountain collapsed, your father and I hid in tens of thousands of feet peak. After things stabilized a bit, we found we couldn't get out, so we went to Immortal's ruins. The reason I came here is because I want to cultivate a secret technique. At that time your father was seriously injured. If we left him alone, he wouldn't have lived for more than a few days. He saved me on the way, so I brought him here. I see. This was indeed the best place to practice Yang spells. Fire was the most important element of Yang, especially since this place was full of immortal fire. After a while, she breathed a sigh of relief and stood up. I finally found it. Chinga asked curiously, What are you looking for? She walked back and spread his hands. Here it's this. Several pitch-black stones lay in his palm. Mo Chinga picked one up and felt the heat was pressing down on her. She thought about it and was surprised. Are these fire essence stones? She nodded with a smile. Yes, they are. The so-called fire essence stone was a kind of ore produced in places with abundant real fire and was commonly known as the essence of fire. In the beginning, the fire essence stone was red. As the real fire essence stone burned for a long time, the red became darker and darker until it finally turned black. These fire essence stones were pitch black in color. Clearly they were of the highest grade. This is what you want to get? Yes. She said, back then I found fire pit stones in this fire pit. I tried my best to take them out of the immortal fire, but the fire was still too strong. I couldn't take them away, so I hid them here. So, you wanted to come back then? There's nothing we can do about it. Back then, you left in such a hurry that you didn't even take your father's corpse with you. Naturally, you have to come back. When he mentioned this matter, Mo Chinga once again recalled what he said. Right, what did my father promise you back then? Why did you say that the matter of dual cultivation is up to you? Upon hearing this, she coughed and looked away. Upon noticing that his face was a bit red, Mo Chinga became even more curious. What? Is there something you can't say? There's no harm in telling you. She smiled and said slowly, no matter which cultivator you tell about a purine constitution, they might be tempted. Your father thought of this, so he said this. This means that I can choose a dual cultivation partner for you, no matter who it is. You can also choose yourself? Your father indeed had this intention. But I didn't have this idea at that time. Believe me, upon seeing him hurriedly denying it, Mo Chinga smiled. It's not like I don't believe you. What's the rush? She sighed and said, I understand what my father meant. In that case, although I don't have the freedom to perform dual cultivation, I can still cultivate diligently. I also have a backer. Relatively speaking, I still have a future. If the person her father entrusted to wasn't him, this would probably be her future. Correct. She said, I won't deny that back then. If you really had a pure-in constitution and spiritual roots, it would be good for Shenqing school to accept you as a disciple and have dual cultivation with other disciples. But you ran away by yourself, so I didn't think about this matter anymore. The two of them were silent for a while. Mo Chinga smiled and said, forget it. Let's not talk about this anymore. We've already achieved our goal. Are we going to leave now? She nodded. Master specifically reminded me to leave as soon as we finished our business. He said there might be a collapse of a big restriction this time, and it might be even bigger than last time. It wouldn't be good if we got implicated. Mo Chinga didn't object. Aside from being fed heavenly aromatic beans, she didn't suffer any injuries. The effects of the heavenly aromatic beans had long worn off, so she had abundant spiritual power now. Then let's go. It'll be half a month and 3 to 5 days. It's hard to say when the restriction at the entrance of Demonic Mountain will appear. The two of them rested for a while, prepared everything and went out the way they came. Mo Chinga looked at the countless holes on the ground burning with immortal fire. She suddenly thought of something and asked Shi, even the ordinary stones here probably have the power of immortal fire sealed in them, right? Shi nodded. Yes. Why do you ask? Mo Chinga said, then, do you have a way to get some up here? She glanced at her but didn't say anything. He took out the 3-yang real fire sword, which emitted a dazzling light. The sword light shot straight down and instantly shot back. He stretched out his hand and used his fire spiritual aura to catch several stones. He handed them to her and said, put them in a jade box. They were just ordinary stones. Even if they were calcined by immortal fire, they should still be preserved in a jade box. Mo Chinga obediently put them in the jade box and asked him to use the 3-yang real fire sword to get some more stones back. Only when the jade box was full did she put it into her Chenkuan bag. After watching her put the stones away, she asked, you don't practice fire spells. What do you need these stones for? Mo Chinga smiled and patted her spiritual beast pouch. You forgot that I have Xiaohua. She suddenly understood. That little spiritual beast was born with sun real fire. If it practiced well, it would definitely be a good helper in the future. After thinking for a while, she said, you have Xiaohua for spiritual beasts, and you have the soul refining art for unique skills. If you refine the heaven and earth fan, you won't lose to ordinary middle-stage core formation cultivators in fights of magical powers. If the power of the heaven and earth fan is amazing, you can also fight against late-stage core formation cultivators. However, you'd better practice several secret techniques. There are always variables in fights of magical powers, so save some unique skills to save your life. Mo Chinga also thought about this. Her best unique skill to save her life was the virtual sky world. Of course, after the incident with Ren Yufeng, she realized that no unique skill was completely reliable, so she'd better prepare several backup plans. Unfortunately, we didn't get any useful treasures on this trip. Otherwise, your cultivation level could also improve. Mo Chinga thought about it and held back her words. She wasn't in a hurry to improve her cultivation level. She had an unlimited supply of clear sky pills and her qualifications weren't bad. Reaching the peak stage of the core formation realm was only a matter of time. This time she found the 1,000-year-old chalcedony and the Chiyun stone, so she was already very happy. Senior Marshal Brother, now that you've found the fire essence stone, are you going to enter closed-door meditation when we go back? She nodded. He keenly noticed that she was a bit depressed, so he asked, "What's wrong? Are you unhappy?" Mo Chinga was stunned for a while then sighed. "I think this time you must be very confident in advancing to the nascent soul realm, right? At that time, our cultivation levels will be one big realm apart." "What's the matter?" She said with a smile. "Which pair of dual cultivation partners doesn't have a cultivation level gap? Even among the Wan and Feng couple, Ding Wan's cultivation level is slightly higher than Feng Zhao's, but don't they still cultivate and live together?" "That's true. But Mo Chinga always felt that the cultivation level gap between them was a bit too big. It wasn't that there weren't nascent soul cultivators and core formation cultivators who became partners, but relatively speaking, the proportion of female cultivators among nascent soul cultivators was very small. Many male cultivators married core formation female cultivators, but their dual cultivation relationships were mostly subordinate. Of course, she wasn't worried about Qin Shi. How could she not trust him now? However, this couldn't go on. Cultivators in the same realm should communicate more and help each other so their relationship would be more stable. Qin Shi thought for a while then said, "What I said last time, we'll practice the same cultivation technique. Have you thought about it?" "About that? It's a good method. You were very confident last time, so did you prepare for it?" Qin Shi smiled. "Of course." Mo Chinga was curious. "You know our physiques are special, and the cultivation technique we practice is also special. Does the dual cultivation technique you mentioned also have this miraculous effect?" Qin Shi smiled but didn't answer. He was anxious because of her urging, so he just said, "You'll know later." The two of them talked all the way back along the path they came from. After half a day they finally returned to tens of thousands of feet peak. They spent another day going down from tens of thousands of feet peak. Once they were out of the range of tens of thousands of feet peak, both of them heaved sighs of relief. There were many dangers in Immortal's ruins, so it was much safer down there. But after a while Mo Chinga was surprised. What are they doing? This was the third time she saw a group of people fighting each other. They fought irrationally and flesh and blood flew everywhere. The scene was so tragic that she couldn't bear to see it. Qin Shi frowned and said, "The restrictions on Demonic Mountain only disappear for about a month, and it's already been more than half a month. Presumably, these people have already found all the treasures they can find inside, and those who can't can only target other people." Mo Chinga also heard a lot of these things. But this time the people fighting each other had extremely high cultivation levels. Most of them were in the core formation realm, and there were very few in the foundation building realm. She thought about Jade Palace again. So many nascent soul cultivators went there for the same unique treasure, so a fierce battle was inevitable. This time, even if the restrictions on Demonic Mountain didn't collapse, many people would have died. The two of them had achieved their purpose of entering Demonic Mountain, so they didn't want to get involved in these things. Whenever they encountered a fight they avoided it. But they were lucky. They often encountered fights where both sides were injured or even killed, so they took a lot of Chenkuan bags along the way. These Chenkuan bags alone were already a great fortune. After picking up another batch of Chenkuan bags, Mo Chinga smiled until her eyes narrowed. "It's really interesting. They fight to death, but we're better off picking up ready-made treasures." Qin Shi also smiled and said shamelessly, "If everyone was as smart as us, of course we wouldn't be able to pick up any treasures. Put them all away. Maybe there are some treasures inside." Mo Chinga didn't stand on ceremony and put all the Chenkuan bags into her bosom. There were so many of them. They might even be richer than her own net worth. Just as they were counting, they suddenly heard a muffled thunder in the sky. Qin Shi looked up and saw that in the sky, where spiritual aura and devil aura intertwined, the wind and clouds surged and violently collided. The spiritual aura and devil aura in Demonic Mountain instantly became chaotic. Not good. The restrictions collapsed. Chapter 306. It wasn't his first time experiencing the collapse of restrictions, so Qinshi was very calm. He unfolded the three-young real fire sword, spread the sword formation and flew forward while pulling Mo Tiange. The flying cloud reached its maximum speed, flying towards the exit of Demonic Mountain. Along the way, countless cultivators flew towards the exit in unison. This was the time to escape, so everyone used their trump cards. No one dared to hold anything back. Even so, some cultivators who couldn't escape in time were sucked into the collapsing restrictions and instantly turned into black ashes. Mo Tiange saw with her own eyes that Daoist Kumu and Tong Tianyun, who came with them, were also sucked into the restrictions and died instantly. Not long after they entered Demonic Mountain, they were separated from those two people. Later they learned from Jing Xingji that those two people indeed harbored evil intentions. They left Madame Feng in the lurch and watched as Lei Dongqing perished, but the two of them relied on that 10,000-year-old spiritual plant to hook up with a nascent soul cultivator and enter Immortal's ruins. Now that the two of them appeared here, they probably didn't get any benefits even if they helped the nascent soul cultivators. Shi and Qin Shi, who had nascent soul masters, didn't think about going in with Lord Daoist Jinghe. Did they really think those nascent soul cultivators would protect them for a 10,000-year-old spiritual herb? Maybe they knew, but their lifespans were about to run out, so they didn't care. The restrictions collapsed faster and faster, and the rumbling sounds were endless. Countless cultivators rushed towards the exit. Qin Shi was calm at first, but he became anxious later on. Such a big movement was even more terrible than the 180 years ago. Master was right. This time was more dangerous than last time. But no matter how fast they ran, they couldn't outrun the collapsing restrictions. Soon, the cultivators not far behind them were also sucked in, and their screams were endless. No! Mo Tiange shouted, "We can't escape like this." How could Qin Shi not know that? But where could they find a safe place at this time? Last time, when the restrictions on Demonic Mountain collapsed, he and Yihai were lucky to hide in the cave on tens of thousands of feet peak. Otherwise they definitely couldn't escape. At this time he couldn't afford to hold back anymore. The sword formation spread out and shone brightly, blocking more and more drifting restrictions in the air. His hands didn't stop moving as he fished out several treasures from his Qingkuan bag. He patted some on himself and gave some to Mo Tiange. He said anxiously, "At least it can block them for a while." The sound of thunder resounded overhead. Mo Tiange's expression changed. She heard Qin Shi say, "It's too late. I can only risk it." Right after he said that, he made a hand seal and circulated the spiritual aura in his body. He was about to use a secret technique. Mo Tiange was startled. Although she didn't know what kind of secret technique Qin Shi was using, she could tell he was using his blood essence. Once such a spell was used, the best result would be a period of rest, but the worst result would be a regression in cultivation. He was already at the peak stage of the core formation realm. If his cultivation level regressed, he didn't know how long it would take for him to reach the nascent soul realm. "Senior brother, don't." Qin Shi didn't pay attention to her. Several drops of blood essence were forced out of his body. He stretched out his hand and wiped it, and the blade of his sword instantly shone with a red light. Just as he was about to activate the three-yang real fire sword, his spiritual aura suddenly became unstable, and the red light on the three-yang real fire sword dimmed. His expression changed. He used his blood essence to search for Mo Tiange's whereabouts before, so he lost some of his strength. Now he couldn't even use the secret technique. Qin Shi was really anxious when he realized this. He was very calm before because of this secret technique. At worst he could take Mo Tiange out even if he got injured. But he didn't expect that he couldn't use the secret technique because he used his blood essence before. Tiange? His mind was full of thoughts. In the end, Qin Shi clenched his teeth, pulled Mo Tiange's hand and said, "If we can't escape, we'll die together." He didn't wait for her to answer and once again turned into a flight light, flying towards the exit. Their lives were at stake now. All of a sudden, Mo Tiange pulled his hand back and stopped. "Tiange?" Qin Shi was anxious. "What's wrong?" Mo Tiange looked up with a solemn expression. Black clouds surged and covered the whole sky. Obviously, the initial instability of the restrictions triggered the collapse of a large area of the restrictions in the sky. If this continued, it would only take a while for the restrictions to collapse here. Although Qin Shi's flying cloud was extremely fast, it was really hard to say whether he could escape or not. Qin Shi was anxious. "If we don't leave now, it'll be too late." Emo Chinga didn't say anything. She held his waist, gathered spiritual aura on her fingertips, and touched the space between her eyebrows. A huge round bead loomed between her eyebrows, emitting a hazy white light. Qinshi's eyes widened. The sound of wind and thunder in the sky became more intense. The speed at which the restrictions collapsed was faster than they expected. People were constantly being sucked in. They didn't even have time to scream before they disappeared without a trace. Emo Chinga silently recited an incantation and cast the incantation on the bead. The white light suddenly exploded, engulfing the two of them. When the white light disappeared, Qinshi was stunned. Bamboo house, bamboo forest, a gentle breeze, a flowing brook, and the smell of medicine lingering around the tip of his nose. It was a somewhat familiar but completely different scene. After entering the virtual sky world, Emo Chinga breathed a sigh of relief. Feifei wagged its tail, threw itself into her arms and squeaked. She smiled and hugged Feifei affectionately. In the end, she patted its head and released Xiaohua from the spiritual beast bag, letting the two of them play. She took a closer look. The medicinal field hadn't been cleaned for a long time, and weeds had grown in it again. She took out 2 stone sculpture puppets from her Chenkuan bag and told them to clean up the medicinal field. These 2 puppets had extraordinary strength, so they were just right to do these chores for her. When she was done, she looked up and saw that Qinshi had finally come back to his senses. There was shock in his eyes but also understanding. When his eyes met hers, he sighed and said, "I finally understand. Turns out this is your biggest secret." Emo Chinga smiled, pulled him into the bamboo house, picked up a praying mat and threw it to him. "You don't need to ask about other things, right?" Qinshi gradually understood. Her pill concocting skills, her medicinal pills, her 10,000-year-old spiritual plants, her spiritual beasts cultivation levels, and all her puzzling things originated from here, the virtual sky world. He thought for a while and asked, "Where did you get this virtual sky world? It shouldn't be a gift from your great ancestor, right?" Emo Chinga shook her head. "No." Zhong Muling said there were only 2 known virtual sky worlds, and both of them belonged to deification cultivators. How could he have given her one? Even if he had one, she was only a foundation-building cultivator back then, so he wouldn't have given it to her. Then how did you get it? Emo Chinga thought for a while then said, "It can be considered a fated chance. When I got it, I didn't know what it was. Later, when I entered my great ancestor's virtual sky world, I realized it was this thing." At that time, Qinshi nodded in understanding. "No wonder your cultivation level rose so fast from then on. It turned out it wasn't only because you obtained the art of the origin, but also because you obtained such a heaven-defying treasure." Emo Chinga smiled when she saw that his tone was full of emotion but there was no greed in his eyes. Letting him know such a big secret was originally a gamble. Fortunately, he hadn't betrayed her trust so far. "Aren't you going to ask why I didn't tell you?" Qinshi smiled when he heard this question. He reached out to touch her face and said, "Do you need to ask? Even if it was me, I wouldn't tell such a big secret to others. An ordinary man is innocent, but treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. This is especially true in the cultivation world. It's best that you know how to protect yourself." Emo Chinga looked up at him and asked, "So, if I never told you, you wouldn't blame me?" Qinshi shook his head. "Why would I blame you? Even if you never told me for the rest of your life, I wouldn't blame you. In fact, I think it's already quite risky for you to bring me here today. Are you so sure I won't have any bad intentions after seeing this virtual sky world?" Emo Chinga hesitated for a moment then answered, "I didn't have time to think about anything else just now. I just thought we couldn't die there. Besides, this virtual sky world has already recognized me as its master. You can't hurt me here." "If I were really scheming, I wouldn't have hurt you here," Qinshi said. Qinshi said, "If nothing happens to me here after I learn your secret, but I imprison you and interrogate you after we go out, what would you do?" His tone was harsh and even accusatory. Emo Chinga was stunned and asked, "Isn't it good for me to trust you?" Qinshi sighed and said, "I know you trust me, but it's hard to judge a person's heart. Trust sometimes comes with a price, and the price you have to pay is too high. If you're not careful, you'll be crushed to pieces." Seeing that Emo Chinga lowered her head after being scolded, Qinshi smiled again. "Of course, I can be an exception, but there can't be a next time, understand?" Emo Chinga smiled. "Of course there won't be a next time. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have brought you here." She had thought about this question many times. If it weren't for today's life-threatening situation, she wouldn't have brought Qinshi here. In fact, after bringing him here, she was also nervous, but Qin Shi's reaction just now made her feel that her trust was worth it. Thinking of today's dangerous situation, she asked worriedly, "Master is still in Immortal's ruins. Will he be in danger?" This question made Qin Shi silent for a while. How could he not be worried? But now that the great restriction on Demonic Mountain had collapsed, they couldn't go out. "Master won't die so easily," he said. "Let's take care of ourselves first. After a few days, when the restriction is stable, we'll look for Master's whereabouts." Mo Chenga also didn't have any good ideas, so she could only do this. Feeling the heavy atmosphere between them, she smiled and said, "Since we're here, I'll take you to see the medicinal field. My pill concocting skills aren't as good as yours, so you might be able to give me some advice on how to deal with these spiritual plants." As she spoke, she pulled him to the medicinal field and told him about some things in the virtual sky world. Qin Shi looked at the densely packed medicinal plants in the medicinal field and was shocked for a long time. He then sighed and said, "These medicinal plants are enough for a big cultivation group to use for hundreds of years. If they're not picked excessively, they'll be enough to support a cultivation group to dominate the celestial pole. That's true, but I don't dare to take them out. A 10,000-year-old spiritual plant can make nascent soul cultivators fight for it. With so many, I don't know what kind of turmoil it will cause." "And you're right," Qin Shi agreed. "Even if they rot here, we can't take them out casually. Otherwise, not only will you be in trouble, but the celestial pole will also be in chaos." He lowered his head and looked at the surrounding medicinal fields. There were many spirit herbs that he had only heard of in legends but had never seen before. These spirit herbs had been trimmed, and their ages ranged from 10,000 years to 1,000 years to a few hundred years. Some of them had only just sprouted. "You said the virtual sky world has existed for hundreds of thousands of years, but why are the oldest spiritual plants only tens of thousands of years old?" Mo Chenga learned about this from the memory in the virtual sky world. Spiritual plants also have a lifespan. Generally, their lifespan ranges from 10,000-year-old to tens of thousands of years, so it's best to pick them and refine them into medicinal pills when they're 10,000-year-old. Because at that time, their medicinal properties have reached their limit. If they continue to grow, they'll die. "I see." It was Qin Shi's first time hearing about this. In the current cultivation world, 10,000-year-old spiritual plants rarely appeared, so no one really knew about this. Standing in the middle of the medicinal field, Mo Chenga looked at the many spiritual plants that had reached 10,000 years old. She then looked at the two busy stone sculpture puppets and said with a smile, "Since we can't go out, help me tidy up the medicinal field." Chapter 307. After the big restriction on Demonic Mountain collapsed, many smaller restrictions followed suit. Almost half of Demonic Mountain was involved. Mo Chenga and Qin Shi were lucky. They entered the virtual sky world in time and weren't affected. The others, however, weren't so lucky. Very few of them managed to escape Demonic Mountain in time. Even many nascent soul cultivators perished inside. This trip to Demonic Mountain was even more tragic than the one over 80 years ago. The casualties of high-level cultivators were disastrous, even more serious than the demonic beast riot last time. The celestial pole was in an uproar. Of course, the two of them didn't know about these things yet. While hiding in the virtual sky world, Mo Chenga occasionally opened it to look at the situation outside. She found that the chain reaction caused by the collapse of the restriction hadn't stopped. The sky fell, the earth cracked, lightning flashed, and the whole Demonic Mountain shook. Since they couldn't go out, the two of them had to put aside the things outside for the time being and live their own lives in the virtual sky world. First of all, Qin Shi lost some strength because he used his blood essence. Fortunately, the concentration of spiritual aura in the virtual sky world was extremely high, so it was faster to heal here than outside. But the strange thing was that Qin Shi said the spiritual aura here had to be transformed by the art of 3 primordial cycles before he could quickly absorb it into his dantian. Otherwise, his cultivation speed wouldn't be much faster than outside. The two of them pondered this situation for a long time and finally guessed that the world had changed. Cultivation techniques had also evolved, and the virtual sky world still maintained the concentration of spiritual aura from the distant past era, which was why the situation occurred. Mo Chenga wasn't affected because she practiced cultivation techniques from the distant past era. As for Qin Shi, his art of 3 primordial cycles originated from the distant past era. But Mo Chenga also thought that his pure yang technique came from Yuan Bao, who lived in Zhong Muling's virtual sky world all year round, so why couldn't he? After asking Qin Shi, he also couldn't understand. Perhaps Yuan Bao thought he wouldn't enter the virtual sky world again, so he didn't tell him some trick? The two of them couldn't understand this problem with their cultivation levels, so they simply left it behind. In any case, it wasn't like they couldn't cultivate here. Secondly, since they couldn't leave the virtual sky world, Mo Chenga had nothing to do, so she simply tidied up the medicinal fields with Qin Shi. She had picked many 10,000-year-old spiritual plants but hadn't refined them into medicinal pills yet. There were still many spiritual plants growing in the medicinal fields. She instructed the two puppets to pick them one by one and reorganize the medicinal fields. These spirit grasses were refined into pills by them. Qin Shi's pill concocting skills were also extremely high. With the two of them working together, their pill concocting speed became much faster. A year later, the medicinal fields were finally tidied up. At this time, Qin Shi's injuries were almost healed, so Mo Chenga began to consider refining her natal magic weapon. Before this, she originally planned to ask the group's tools refiners to refine tools for her, but she didn't know how long she'd have to stay in the virtual sky world, so she could only rely on herself for everything. Thus, she began to learn tool refining again. However, her talent in tool refining really wasn't very good. There were spiritual plants everywhere in the virtual sky world, but there weren't many materials needed for tool refining. In the end, it was Qin Shi who couldn't bear to see her like this, so he personally refined for her. Qin Shi's talent in miscellaneous studies was higher than hers. Whether it was pill concocting, tool refining, or even talisman crafting, he had a considerable level of skill. However, he did not dare to be careless when it came to refining a natal magic treasure, so he spent a lot of time practicing again. The two of them slowly cultivated while learning how to refine weapons. Just like that, years passed by. In the beginning, Mo Chenga often went to see what was going on outside the virtual sky world, but the collapse of Demonic Mountain this time lasted for a long time. In the end, she only went to see it after a long time. When she opened the virtual sky world again and saw that it was still dark outside, Mo Chenga sighed. This was already the 5th year, but the restrictions were still unstable. She really didn't know when they could go out. Before the restrictions collapsed, Master went to Jade Palace. She didn't know whether he escaped or not. Jinji had been missing for several years at that time. Could he go back now? Don't think about it. When the time comes, you'll naturally be able to go out. Qin Shi's voice came from behind her. Mo Chenga waved her sleeves, erased the scene outside, then turned around. Why did you come out? They failed to refine the heaven and earth fan once, so he shut himself in his room for many days. He said he couldn't fail again and had to carefully figure out the characteristics of the materials. Qin Shi smiled. I finished my research, so I came out. Mo Chenga's eyes brightened. Then can we refine it again? And? Qin Shi thought for a moment and said, it should be possible. How's your cultivation these days? Very smooth. Mo Chenga reached out her hand. Take a look. Qin Shi put his hand on her pulse and separated a wisp of spiritual aura to test her pulse. After a while, he withdrew his spiritual aura and said with a smile, your cultivation here is indeed twice the result with half the effort. With clear sky pills and the virtual sky world, her cultivation speed was simply fast compared to ordinary cultivators. Even if she encountered a bottleneck, she didn't need to worry too much with the experienced Qin Shi guiding her. What about you? When will you form your nascent soul? The two of them were trapped here and didn't know when they could go out. Qin Shi's cultivation level had reached the peak, and his mentality had also adjusted. It could be said that forming his nascent soul was already a matter of course. This question made Qin Shi ponder for a long time. In the end he said, when I form my nascent soul, I'll definitely use the art of 3 primordial cycles as the main method, so forming my nascent soul here won't affect me. But there's no need to worry. Let's refine your natal magic weapon first. Mo Chenga said with a smile. The youngest known person to form their nascent soul in the celestial pole was 208 years old. You're 206 years old now. Forming your nascent soul now can still set a record, but it won't be so sensational in a few years. Don't you want to break this record? Qin Shi shook his head and said with a faint smile, what's the point of fighting for these empty titles? There's no harm in delaying it for a year or two. Mo Chenga felt relieved upon hearing what he said. In the past few years, Qin Shi's mentality was too impatient, so he failed to form his nascent soul again and again. Now that he was so calm, it could be seen that his mentality was stable. In that case, there wouldn't be any big obstacles when he formed his nascent soul. In fact, Qin Shi's mentality was originally very stable. In the past few years he completely walked into the trap he set himself, so a loophole appeared in his mentality. The root of this loophole was Mo Chenga. Now that the two of them were already in love, he naturally restored his original calm and tranquil state of mind. The two of them talked for a while, then went back to their respective cultivations. Their cultivation techniques didn't conflict with each other. One was a pure yang cultivator while the other was a pure yin cultivator, so they complemented each other. Therefore, they didn't need to use two separate cultivation rooms and could directly cultivate together in Mo Chenga's original cultivation room. After a day of adjusting their breaths, both their spiritual aura and mentality were restored to their peak, so they prepared to refine magic weapons. Refining a natal magic weapon was different from refining ordinary magic weapons. Even if ordinary magic weapons needed to recognize their master, the owner didn't need to be present during the refining process. Natal magic weapons, on the other hand, had to be refined with a cultivator's blood essence. Therefore, although Qinshi took charge of refining, he still needed Mo Chenga's cooperation. After a failed refinement, Qinshi was particularly cautious this time. Qiyun stones were only enough for them to refine one more time. If they failed again, they would have to look for materials again. However, Qiyun stones were extremely difficult to find, so it might take them several decades to find them. Qinshi used his extreme yang real fire to refine the weapons. Sunstone or Xiaohua's extreme yang real fire were both good, but Qinshi's extreme yang real fire was a bit stronger. He also had countless restorative panaceas to eat, so he chose to use extreme yang real fire. Once everything was ready, the two of them closed themselves in the refining room, laid a barrier to prevent the two spiritual beasts from disturbing them, and started refining. This refining process took more than a month. This wasn't a long time for a natal magic weapon. If it weren't for Qinshi's extreme yang real fire melting materials quickly and his previous practice, it would have taken at least a few months. After more than a month, the two of them stepped out of the refining room. The heaven and earth fan was completed. Dragon bones were used as the frame, natural silk brocade as the fan surface, Qiyun stones and bewitching moonlight stones were smelted as paint, and mountains, rivers, flowers, and birds were painted on the fan surface. Finally, it was wrapped in thousand-year-old chalcedony and refined carefully. The hardness of dragon bones and the toughness of thousand-year-old chalcedony were combined into one. After the heaven and earth fan was successfully refined, it could basically be said to be the toughest magic weapon. Even Qinshi's three-yang real fire sword couldn't completely destroy it. In the beginning, the two of them had a dispute about the shape of the magic weapon. Qinshi naturally thought it should be a round fan, while Mo Chenga insisted on a folding fan. It was fine if she liked to wear palace clothes, but she usually wore Shenqing School's Taoist robes and only had one or two hairpins in her hair. How would she look holding a round fan? It wasn't as good as a folding fan. It was suitable for both men and women, and if she occasionally wanted to dress up as a man, she could also pretend to be a scholar or something. Qinshi couldn't argue with her, so he had to comply. When the heaven and earth fan was finished, Mo Chenga couldn't take her eyes off it. The landscape made of Qiyun stones and bewitching moonlight stones was so exquisite that it couldn't be distinguished from the real one. The flowers, birds, fish and insects were vivid. Not to mention its real effect, the fan itself was already extremely beautiful. When the two of them came out of the refining room, Qinshi watched Mo Chenga admiring the heaven and earth fan and teased her. "I said you didn't look like a woman, but it turns out you also like beautiful things." Mo Chenga played with the heaven and earth fan in her hand and said, "Who doesn't like beautiful things? It's just that I'm rarely addicted to them." For example, when she first entered Shenqing School, she also liked the hairpins and rings he gave her, but after enjoying them, cultivation was still the most important thing. Alright, let's try the power of the magic weapon first. Whether it's beautiful or not is secondary. Hearing Qinshi's reminder, Mo Chenga looked up and asked, "How?" Qinshi thought about it and said, "This treasure can trap and kill, and it can also trap and defend. How about I try defending first?" Okay. Mo Chenga waved the heaven and earth fan and spread its surface. In an instant, the fan was overflowing with light, reflecting a sparkling and lifelike picture of mountains and rivers. Qinshi stretched out his left hand and concentrated. With a flash of golden light, the three-yang real fire sword appeared in his palm. He shook his arm and the sword turned into a golden light. Surrounded by the real fire, it circled around him twice, then suddenly changed direction and rushed towards Mo Chenga. Mo Chenga watched carefully and immediately used the heaven and earth fan. The picture of mountains and rivers suddenly enlarged and shrouded the sword light like real mountains and rivers. After being surrounded by the mountains and rivers, the sword light stopped and revealed the true form of the three-yang real fire sword. The sword began to move left and right, but it couldn't break through the seemingly invisible mountains and rivers. Finally, Qin Shi withdrew the three-yang real fire sword and said helplessly, "The sword itself can't break through. Seems I have to use my sword." Emo Chenga was overjoyed that the power of the heaven and earth fan was extraordinary. Even if it was only the three-yang real fire sword itself, ordinary early-stage core formation cultivators couldn't block it. After this test, she had great confidence in the heaven and earth fan. Chapter 308. Qin Shi's three-yang real fire sword was also a natal magic weapon. Although it also used sword moves, it was different from a sword cultivator's sword. Generally, sword cultivators had already chosen their main sword when they were in the foundation building realm or even the aura refining realm. After that, they couldn't leave this sword for the rest of their lives. Their natal sword was constantly nourished and refined, and its rank would also constantly improve. As their cultivation level increased, it would become more and more powerful. This was similar to natal magic weapons, but natal magic weapons could only be refined after they reached the core formation realm, while sword cultivators could have their natal swords when they were in the aura refining realm. Because of this, sword cultivators were often stronger than ordinary cultivators. Of course, it wasn't only beneficial. If a cultivator's natal magic weapon was damaged, it would often affect the cultivator himself. If a sword cultivator's sword was damaged, the result would be more serious than that of an ordinary cultivator. If it was light, they would be seriously injured. If it was heavy, they would die. Moreover, all the skills of a sword cultivator were on their sword. If they lost their sword, even if they could keep their life, their cultivation level would most likely be crippled. As for Qin Shi, although he used the three-yang real fire sword as a magic weapon, he didn't rely on it as much as sword cultivators did. His strongest skill wasn't his sword moves. His three-yang real fire sword was extremely powerful, which often made people mistakenly think his sword moves were very powerful. In fact, his real killing move was the three-yang real fire on his sword. After explaining this to Emo Chenga, the three-yang real fire sword in his hand burst into a blazing red light and rushed toward the heaven and earth fan. Emo Chenga unfolded the heaven and earth fan, and the mountains and rivers turned solid, completely surrounding the three-yang real fire sword. Under the heavy pressure of the mountains and rivers, the sword couldn't break through. At that moment, the sword suddenly glowed red. Qin Shi made a sword art and the three-yang real fire sword came out. Emo Chenga was very anxious. The mountains and rivers pressed down and firmly pressed the sword, but the three-yang real fire couldn't block it no matter what. She only felt a threatening aura rising to the sky, and her whole body was surrounded. She circulated her spiritual aura, and the spiritual aura shield of the art of primordial singular energy lit up, but it couldn't block this heat. It only lasted for a while before the spiritual aura shield was also burned. The moment the shield was broken, Qin Shi shook his arm and withdrew the three-yang real fire sword. Emo Chenga stood for a while, calmed down a bit and also withdrew the heaven and earth fan. Although she knew his three-yang real fire sword was very powerful, she didn't know it was this powerful. His technique was very simple and could hardly be considered a technique. However, it was precisely because there was no technique that it was not easy to break through. This was because this was a battle of real strength. If one couldn't win against Chu Yang's three-yang real fire, then they could only be defeated. However, Chu Yang's body was filled with pure yang spiritual energy. After cultivating the three-yang real fire, its destructive power was even greater than that of the sun real fire. You don't have to be depressed. Seeing that she hadn't spoken for a long time, Qin Shi smiled and said, "Not to mention the fact that my three-yang real fire sword has been nourished for more than 100 years, but based on the gap between our cultivation levels, wouldn't I be too inferior if I couldn't even defeat a cultivator who just formed her gold core?" Emo Chenga regained her senses. It wasn't that she had to compete with Qin Shi, it was just that she was shocked after suddenly witnessing his strength. This also made her realize that she was still very far from the limits of what a core formation cultivator could achieve. Thinking of this, she smiled, held the heaven and earth fan and asked, "What do you think after trying it?" Qin Shi thought for a moment then said, "It seems your heaven and earth fan has a strong restraining effect on magic weapons. If you encounter sword cultivators in the future, I don't think you'll be at a disadvantage. But when it comes to magic arts, it hasn't used the word trap yet." Emo Chenga also knew that the heaven and earth fan was originally a kind of magic weapon conceived by Emo Yaoqing, but it lacked actual examples. She still needed to figure out how to use it by herself. The word trap alone could be used for both offense and defense, so it wasn't something she could figure out in a short time. "Okay, let's try the effect of the attack again." Qin Shi waved his sleeve, and the three young real fire sword turned into several sword lights that circled around him. Emo Chenga nodded, then opened the heaven and earth fan again. This time it was completely different from before. Smoke and water rushed out, and the mountains and rivers seemed to come alive in an instant. Even the flowers and birds inside appeared real. She was stunned for a moment. Just like that, the world suddenly changed. He looked around and found that the scenery around him was exactly the same as the mountains and rivers on the heaven and earth fan, as if he himself had entered the painting. Although he had long known this was the illusory formation on the heaven and earth fan, what he saw and heard in front of him was exactly the same as the real one, so he was still a little shocked. It was really unexpected for a magic weapon that had just been refined to have this kind of power. Thinking up to this point, he frowned and looked around carefully, looking for flaws. Emo Chenga, who was outside the illusory formation, saw Qinshi turn around for a while inside the illusory formation. He seemed to have found something and showed a smile. Then he used the sword formation and the red light shone brightly. A kind of invincible power spread out. She hurriedly operated her spiritual aura, trying to suppress Qinshi's counterattack, but the gap between their cultivation levels was obvious. Qinshi's three young real fire still slowly spread out and finally engulfed the mountains and rivers. This time she failed even more miserably than the last time. Last time, Qinshi could see it, so he could take back the three young real fire in time. This time, when he broke the formation, he couldn't see it clearly. The three young real fire burned, so Emo Chenga had to give up her defense and escape the range of the three young real fire in a sorry state. When the mountains and rivers dispersed, Qinshi took back the three young real fire sword. Seeing Emo Chenga standing there thoughtfully, he asked with a smile, "What's wrong? Are you shocked?" Emo Chenga looked away and said in a daze, "Magic weapons alone aren't enough." Qinshi smiled. The three young real fire disappeared and returned to his dantian. He walked closer and said, "Of course magic weapons alone aren't enough. We're not sword cultivators, we only need to cultivate our swords. We cultivate ourselves. If our cultivation levels aren't strong, our strength will be weak, and our magic weapons naturally won't be so powerful." Emo Chenga cheered up, unfolded the heaven and earth fan and said with a smile, "In any case, this kind of magic weapon is already very strong. If I cultivate well, I'll only become stronger and stronger in the future." It's good that you understand. In terms of cultivation, Emo Chenga's ideas were very similar to his, so they got along very well. Even if there were some differences, they could slowly get used to each other. In the past 5 years, the two of them lived here in seclusion. Sometimes, when he thought about it carefully, he felt that these days were as perfect as a dream. They didn't have fierce personalities. When they were together, they were as calm as water. They were like companions, like teachers and friends, and they occasionally had tender feelings. He thought that was enough. Of course, it wasn't like they didn't have friction. Emo Chenga was strong and unwilling to rely on others. In this relationship, he often unconsciously acted strong. Occasionally there would be quarrels, but later they would compromise with each other and accept each other's ideas and practices. Sometimes, he thought that this was the perfect dual cultivation life he envisioned, right? On the long road to longevity, if there was no one to accompany him, he would always feel lonely in retrospect. But if he was entangled in love, it wasn't what he wanted. Now, he had someone to accompany him and he could focus on cultivation. It was really the best. "What are you looking at?" Emo Chenga couldn't help but ask, feeling creeped out by his warm eyes. She smiled and suddenly reached out to hold her waist, hugging her tightly. "Let's make a blood oath?" Emo Chenga was stunned. Huh. She knew what a blood oath was. It was a kind of oath that most Tao companions made, similar to a spiritual beast contract. The two people who made a blood oath could never hurt each other. But the difference between a blood oath and a spiritual beast contract was that after a blood oath was made, there would be a sense between the two people. The other person would know clearly whether the other person was good or bad, dead or alive. She said slowly, "I know, you definitely won't be willing to follow me all the time. So, when we occasionally separate with a blood oath between us, I can also know whether you're good or bad." Emo Chenga was speechless for a while. She knew this was his compromise, tacitly agreeing to her freedom. Since he couldn't get an answer from her, she called again, "Chenga?" Emo Chenga looked up and smiled brightly. "Okay." Establishing a blood oath was equivalent to a dual cultivation ceremony. It was even more important than a dual cultivation ceremony. Many dual cultivation partners did not establish a blood oath because most immortal cultivators were suspicious and did not dare to easily make such an oath that they could not get rid of in their entire lives. Therefore, with Emo Chenga's consent, Qin was overjoyed. He thought for a moment and said, "But we can't be too hasty. How about we wait until we go back and report to Master?" This conclusion was quickly rejected by him. "No, we don't know when we can go out." Mo Chenga found it funny to see him struggling alone. "Do we need to do this?" "Of course, making a blood oath should be more cautious than a dual cultivation ceremony," Qin said seriously. "But I think it's fine as long as the two of us are sincere." "You're right, but—" He looked ashamed. "This is too unfair for you." "Unfair for what? Dual cultivation isn't something you can do alone." Mo Chenga held his fingers and said seriously, "We're not mortals, so why should we rigidly adhere to mortals' rules?" Qin was stunned, but he didn't say anything. Although he went to Mount Taikang since he was a child, he grew up in a prince's mansion in the secular world, so some of his ideas inevitably carried traces of the secular world. For example, he was unconsciously strong in their relationship. On the contrary, although Mo Chenga stayed in the secular world for a longer time, she was originally an ordinary village girl and didn't have much experience. Many things she heard only after she arrived in Kunwu, so her ideas were more similar to those of cultivators. After pondering for a while, Qin somewhat understood. He thought for a while and finally said, "Then let's hold our own wedding?" Wedding? Qin smiled and looked at her gently. "You're right. It's fine as long as the two of us are sincere. But I always feel that a dual cultivation ceremony sounds a bit too cold, as if it's just for cultivation. That being the case, let's hold a wedding for the two of us, okay?" How could Mo Chenga say no? He was even more willing to give than she wanted. She remembered that when she was a child in Mo family's village, her aunt always wanted Tianxiao to learn cooking and housekeeping so she could marry into a good family. She also vaguely thought about getting married, but at that time she had already set foot on the path to immortality and learned about the existence of the cultivation world from books. She thought that when she went to the cultivation world in the future, she only needed to find a like-minded person. Later, when she arrived in Kunwu, she followed second uncle to many places to avoid the fate of becoming a human furnace. She only wanted to become stronger and didn't even dare to reveal her identity as a woman, so how could she think about dual cultivation? Later, when she met him, although she secretly had feelings for him, she told herself in her heart that she didn't need to think too much about hopeless things and just focused on cultivation. Everything she obtained today was something she originally thought she would never be able to obtain in her lifetime. "All right, I'll listen to you." Chapter 309. In the cultivation world, there was no wedding in the secular world. They called it the dual cultivation ceremony. The dual cultivation ceremony meant that a man and a woman would become dual cultivation partners. This sounded very fair, but just as Qin said, it was filled with an ice-cold callousness. Dual cultivation was still for the sake of cultivation. Therefore, the most important thing to measure a cultivator's worth was their cultivation and talent. Very few of them dual cultivated for the sake of their feelings. Most of them did it for the sake of cultivation. Therefore, many dual cultivation partners would never establish a blood oath. In fact, when benefits were involved, the husband and wife would even turn against each other. Moreover, don't think that just because it wasn't called a wedding, there were no secular affairs. They still talked about dowry and betrothal gifts, but these were all replaced with spirit stones, spiritual treasures and pills. If it was a marriage alliance between two cultivation clans, then it would be even more troublesome. When it came to haggling, it would definitely not lose to those mortals. Occasionally, Mo Chenga also recalled Yao Zixio and Shang Ruan, whom she met in Ziwei's Immortal's cave. Although they were cultivators, their marriages were even more complicated than mortals. Of course, for people like Mo Chenga and Qin who didn't belong to any clans and had the same master, it would be much simpler. But no matter how simple it was, Mo Chenga was still somewhat opposed to the so-called dual cultivation ceremony. She knew that although she and Qin were martial siblings and they were cultivators in the same realm now, the gap between them wasn't just a little. A cultivator who had reached the peak of the core formation stage and was very likely to advance to the nascent soul stage after a single session of secluded meditation was completely different from a cultivator who had just reached the core formation stage. The former might be able to enter the nascent soul stage in one go and become the pillar of the sect, but the latter still had to rely on the sect. Of course, she believed that one day she would also form her nascent soul, but what about now? If she really went back to report this to her master and held a dual cultivation ceremony, she and Qin would become the topic of conversation among fellow disciples and even outsiders. They would talk about the gap between them and their possible outcomes. She didn't mind other people's opinions, but she didn't like the feeling of being judged. So, when he said that she should hold a wedding for the two of them, she was actually very happy. Since they didn't have any wedding clothes, the two of them found some red clothes from the Chenkuan bags they picked up on Demonic Mountain. They made some changes and used them as wedding clothes. If there were no red candles, he would use the fire obsidian stone, which was used to forge weapons, as a red candle. There were no guests, only two stone sculpture puppets observing the ceremony from the side. There were no ceremonial officials. Xiaohua and Feifei were witnesses. Heaven and earth as the witness, the sun and moon as the medium. Dear Master, I raise my cup in a toast. From then on they were husband and wife. Then he swore a blood oath. Blood essence exchange, you have me and you, I have you and me. After the wedding, the couple sat in the bamboo forest by the stream. There was no sun and moon rotation inside the virtual sky world, so Qinshi came up with an idea. He wanted her to use an art to tear open the sky inside the virtual sky world. Outside, Demonic Mountain was still shrouded in darkness. Devil aura intertwined, making it seem like night had fallen. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled outside, but the scenery inside was different. The two of them sat for a long time before Qinshi said with a sigh, "Looks like we'll have to be trapped here for at least 2 to 3 years." Mo Qianga had long been mentally prepared for this. They had been trapped here for 5 years. In the beginning, the earth shook and the mountains collapsed. Even now, the restrictions were still occasionally triggered. 2 to 3 years was already a conservative estimate. If the restrictions remained unstable, it might take more than 10 years. After more than 10 years, the people outside would probably think that they were dead, right? If Master was still here with the natal spirit lamp in hand, of course, he would know that they were still alive, but if Master did not escape, thinking of this, Mo Qianga couldn't help but worry. I don't know if Master escaped. Qinshi smiled, put his arm around her waist and said, "Don't worry too much. Although Master is usually unreliable, he's faster than anyone else when it comes to escaping. Besides, Master has lived for almost 1,000 years. He's seen more things and experienced more dangers than we do. He won't die here so easily." Mo Qianga accepted his explanation. She knew Master's ability, so although she was worried, she still thought Master could escape. What made her the most uneasy was Jinji. After thinking for a while, Mo Qianga asked, "Did you leave Jinji's blood essence behind?" Qinshi shook his head. "He's only in the foundation building realm. According to convention, he won't leave his natal spirit lamp until he forms his gold core." Mo Qianga was also aware of this point, but she was just asking with hope in her heart. "When we entered Demonic Mountain, Jinji had been missing for many years. I don't know if he has returned." Qinshi also couldn't answer this question. Yi Jinji was his disciple. Although he didn't bring him up, he followed him as soon as he built his foundation. He knew Jinji lacked experience and acted childishly, so when Jinji wanted to go out to gain experience, he agreed very much. But Jinji's cultivation level was low, and he didn't have enough experience, so it was really hard to say whether he could turn danger into safety in times of crisis. In the end, Qinshi said, "Apart from Master, Jinji is the closest person to us. If something happened to him, we should have sensed it, but we haven't sensed it, so he should be fine." Mo Qianga knew he was just comforting her. Cultivators sensed destiny by chance, so they couldn't sense everything. But in any case, it was good that they didn't sense anything bad. Some things were powerless and could only be left to fate. Seeing that she was troubled, Qinshi pulled her into his arms and suddenly lowered his head to say in her ear, "It's useless to worry about these things. Let's think about what we should do now." "Do what?" Mo Qianga thought for a while, then said, "Concocting medicinal pills, cultivating, studying cultivation techniques." "Not that." Qinshi smiled. "Apart from these, don't we have anything else to do?" From his gaze, Mo Qianga suddenly realized something, so she immediately shut her mouth and stopped talking. Qinshi couldn't help but laugh at her reaction. "You don't have to feel uneasy. We're not together for dual cultivation or anything else. If you don't want to, we can talk about it later." Mo Qianga hesitated for a moment, then said in a low voice, "Since we're already husband and wife, what's there to be unwilling about?" Hearing this, Qinshi was delighted and reached out to hug her. "So you, wait." Mo Qianga looked up and stopped him. She smiled slyly and said, "But we haven't made things clear yet." Qinshi was stunned and puzzled. "What do you want to say?" "There are a lot of things to say. For example, what's your cultivation technique? What's the dual cultivation technique you mentioned? How many secrets do you have?" Seeing that he didn't speak, Mo Qianga glared at him. "What? You can't tell me?" "Fine. Qin, she said helplessly, but even if I have some secrets, you should know most of them. For example? For example, the changes in my physique, my cultivation technique, my yang spiritual bead. Don't you already know about all of these? The yang spiritual bead in his body was his biggest secret, and Mo Chenga had long known about this secret. Mo Chenga thought about it and felt he was right. She had long guessed the secret of the yang spiritual bead. Later, her master even deliberately told her about it. Then what about the dual cultivation technique you mentioned last time? You should at least tell me about it, right? Qin, she always pretended to be mysterious about this matter, saying she would know when the time came. Now that the two of them were husband and wife, it should be time, right? Qin, she smiled. This time he didn't refuse and asked her, do you have the art of Sunu? Mo Chenga nodded. Both her master and him knew about this matter. Qin, she put his hand into his Chengkuan bag, took out a jade slip and handed it to her. Take a look at this. Mo Chenga looked at him in bewilderment. She took the jade slip and probed it with her divine sense. In the next second she was shocked. This is... Qin, she smiled and said, the yin and yang dual cultivation technique Senior Yuan Bao gave me. This cultivation technique was composed of 3 parts. The first part was the pure yang technique, the second part was the art of Sunu, and the third part was the yin and yang dual cultivation technique. Mo Chenga carefully compared it. Her art of Sunu was basically the same as the art of Sunu in this cultivation technique, with only some small changes. She pondered for a while. Her version might have been modified by Mo Yaoqing according to her cultivation situation, or it might have been obtained by Mo Yaoqing from her cultivation group, so it was originally a different version from Yuan Bao's. Reading up to this point, Mo Chenga was happy on one side and worried on the other. She was happy because dual cultivation for people with pure yang and pure yin constitutions was an extremely fast cultivation speed. This yin and yang dual cultivation technique would be extremely beneficial for the two of them. But she was worried because she didn't simply have a pure yin constitution. It could even be said that her spiritual roots of the origin had a greater impact on her aptitude than her pure yin constitution. If she gave up on the art of the origin and focused on cultivating this yin and yang dual cultivation technique, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Qin, she noticed that her brows were tightly knitted and her expression was constantly changing. He asked, what's wrong? Mo Chenga sighed and told him her thoughts honestly. Qin, she smiled and said, are you stupid? Who said you can only cultivate one cultivation technique? I remember you also have the art of the origin given by your great ancestor, right? The cultivation technique you're cultivating now combines the two, so it's naturally the most efficient. But if you cultivate them separately, the difference won't be too big. Mo Chenga was suddenly enlightened. Right? How could I forget? The Sunu art of the origin was a cultivation technique that combined the Taiyuan record and the art of Sunu. However, Zhong Muling also said that this cultivation technique didn't conflict with the 2 original cultivation techniques. Combining them into one would allow her cultivation efficiency to reach the highest, but if she cultivated them separately, it would only take her a bit more time. Before this, since she already had the Sunu art of the origin, she didn't need to cultivate them separately. But now it was different. With this yin and yang dual cultivation technique, even if she cultivated them separately, the effect would still be excellent. Her mind raced and she said, right, maybe we don't need to cultivate them separately. The Sunu art of the origin was comprehended by a deification cultivator, so maybe it can be applied to the dual cultivation technique. Besides, I'm about to form my nascent soul. Qin, she also thought of a possibility. After I form my nascent soul, my comprehension of cultivation techniques will be incomparable to today's. We'll know when we try it. Mo Chenga smiled. If that's the case, it's completely feasible even if there's a gap in our cultivation levels. Qin, she nodded and looked down at her. He suddenly said, why don't we try it now? Mo Chenga was about to say she hadn't looked at the cultivation technique carefully, but she suddenly realized what he meant by try it. Her cheeks immediately burned. We'll talk about this later. No need to talk about it anymore. Qin, she stopped her. This day will come. Chapter 310. The two of them were trapped in a paradise-like place, bowed to heaven and earth and made a blood oath. Some things happened naturally. As a result, their originally peaceful and warm days were occasionally filled with sweetness. They weren't enthusiastic people. Even though they committed to dual cultivation, they only enjoyed the faint warmth. Mo Chenga was very satisfied with this kind of life. She didn't feel too lonely and it didn't affect her cultivation. They were together, accompanied each other, discussed cultivation and exchanged thoughts. However, not long after they were together, Qin found something changed. Next was Mo Tiange. She also felt as if there was something stirring inside her dantian. They both noticed the restlessness in each other's eyes. Mo Tiange asked, "Is there something wrong with you?" Qin frowned, nodded, and asked, "What about you? Do you also feel?" Mo Tiange was a bit distressed. "Well, what should I do? Will the spiritual aura I get this way be unstable? How could it be?" This question made Qin laugh. If there was a problem, why were there so many people in the cultivation world who practiced dual cultivation? Don't think too much. Just cultivate well. After a pause, he said, "I originally planned to advance to the nascent soul realm after a while, but now I can't wait. The spiritual aura in my body is surging, and my dantian and meridians can no longer hold it. If I let it go, it's not good for me, so I have to advance to the nascent soul realm." Oh. Mo Tiange understood. When spiritual aura accumulated to a certain level, the body would automatically request to advance. Presumably he was at this stage now. Then when will you advance to the nascent soul realm? Qin thought for a while, then said, 3 days later. I can't suppress this spiritual aura for too long. So soon? Qin stroked her head and smiled. I can't help it. I didn't expect dual cultivation would be like this. Suddenly obtaining so much spiritual aura must be uncomfortable for you. It's better to enter closed-door meditation while I'm advancing to the nascent soul realm. Maybe I can advance to the middle stage of the core formation realm in one go. Mo Tiange nodded and accepted his suggestion. She had been in the core formation realm for 6 or 7 years, and she had been adapting. Now that her natal magic weapon was formed and she gradually learned various cultivation techniques, it was time to continue her closed-door meditation. To enter the intermediate stage of the completion level in one go was very difficult. Ordinary cultivators would need at least 100 years to reach the early stage of core formation. Even geniuses would need 30 to 40 years. Of course, it wasn't like there was no hope at all. The virtual sky world had rich spiritual aura, countless clear sky pills, and the yang spiritual aura she obtained from Qin. If her cultivation went smoothly, she might really be able to advance to the middle stage of the core formation realm during this period of time. But if he did that, there might be a risk of his realm becoming unstable. However, no matter what, the spiritual energy was unstable, so she had to go into seclusion. After the two came to an agreement, they began to prepare for their secluded cultivation in the next 3 days. Over the years, they had refined a lot of elixirs while cleaning up the herb fields, so they didn't need to refine elixirs on the spot. Therefore it was easy to prepare. They just needed to rearrange the cultivation room for their seclusion. Advancing to the nascent soul realm wasn't the same as cultivating on a normal day. They definitely couldn't be disturbed by others, not even if Mo Tiange just watched from the side. Therefore they had to have a separate cultivation room. For this reason, Mo Tiange deliberately gave Qin a spirit-gathering formation from the Xuanji formation book and asked him to arrange it in a separate cultivation room. Although the formation Qin used was good, he was still inferior to Mo Tiange in this aspect. The Xuanji formation book could be said to be the best secret formation book in the celestial pole. With this book, Mo Tiange's attainments and formations could be ranked first even in the celestial pole. It only took them 1 day to prepare everything. For the next 2 days, the two of them didn't do anything else. They just strolled around, chatted, and relaxed. The state of mind was very important in advancing to the nascent soul realm, and one's mood was also one of the states of mind. On the 3rd day, Qin looked at the time and finally said, "It's almost time." Seeing his serious expression, Mo Tiange couldn't help but ask, "Are you okay?" Qin looked down at her. "What's okay?" Mo Tiange pondered in her heart for a while, then comforted him. "Your cultivation is perfect now and you're full of spiritual aura. Advancing to the nascent soul realm is just a matter of time, so you don't need to be nervous." Qin paused for a moment, then smiled. "Are you afraid I'll have a shadow in my heart because I failed to advance to the nascent soul realm 3 times? Mo Tiange smiled embarrassedly. "I've never advanced to the nascent soul realm, so I can't give you any advice." Before she could finish, Qin heaved a sigh and hugged her. Mo Tiange thought for a moment, then swallowed the rest of her words. She also reached out and hugged his waist. The two of them hugged in silence for a while. Then Qin said softly, "I understand your feelings. Don't worry, I know what I should do." Mo Tiange answered softly. She knew he always had his own ideas. Now that his inner demons had been broken, he knew what he should do. However, she still couldn't help but worry. She had never felt this way before. It wasn't that she hadn't worried about others. When she was a child, it was her mother, and later it was second uncle. But for these two people, even if she worried about them, she didn't have this kind of feeling in her heart all the time. She always thought her feelings were very calm, but now she realized that calm could also be very strong. She couldn't help but hug him tighter, not because she was afraid of losing him, but because she wanted to be closer to him. Under her cheeks, Qinshi's chest rose and fell, making her feel warm and reliable. Time passed bit by bit. After an unknown amount of time, she finally let go of him. "You, go in." Qinshi didn't move. He still hugged her waist tightly. "Senior Marshal Brother?" After a long time he heaved a long sigh. "For the first time, I feel a little reluctant to enter closed-door meditation." Mo Qianga didn't say anything, but a smile appeared on her face. It felt really good to have a response to her feelings. "What are you afraid of?" she said softly. "When you come out, I'll still be here." "But, we won't see each other for several years," he said in a low voice. What he said stunned Mo Qianga, but she soon heaved a sigh. This was what cultivators were like. Unless their cultivation levels were similar in the future and they practiced the same cultivation technique, they could avoid the situation where one of them entered closed-door meditation and couldn't see the other for several years. She didn't think the two of them had to stick together, but the feeling of being separated for several years or even several decades from time to time was indeed not very pleasant. However, no matter what happened in the future, soul formation had to be separated. Thinking of this, Mo Qianga urged him again. "It's getting late. Why don't you go in?" Qinshi still didn't move. Mo Qianga was a bit anxious. This time he didn't choose the time to form his nascent soul. His body had reached its limit. If he delayed for too long, she didn't know whether it would be bad for him or not. She pushed him. "Senior Marshal Brother." Qinshi moved and said, "What did you call me?" Mo Qianga was stunned. "What? I suddenly remembered we're husband and wife now. Shouldn't you change the way you call me?" Mo Qianga couldn't adapt to the sudden change of topic. "But you're my Senior Marshal Brother. Otherwise what would I call you?" Qinshi lowered his head and chuckled. "Although there aren't many people in Shenqing School who call me Senior Marshal Brother, there are still a few. I want a name that only belongs to you." The intimacy in his words made Mo Qianga's face burn. "What did you say?" Qinshi looked down into her eyes and said softly, "Call me husband, okay?" Mo Qianga felt her face was burning. She controlled herself for a long time and finally squeezed out two words. "No." Qinshi raised his eyebrows, puzzled. "Why?" No means no. This. Although she knew they were husband and wife, she just couldn't say the word husband and wife. It was too intimate. Just once. "Can't I say it?" "No." Mo Qianga turned her head to the side resolutely. No, she couldn't say it. Qinshi persisted and turned her head back. "I'm going to enter closed-door meditation and won't see you for several years. You still won't say it?" "No." "You really don't want it?" "I don't want it." She wouldn't let go no matter what, so Qinshi could only sigh. "Fine, it's fine if you don't want to say it, but you have to show me something." Seeing that she didn't respond, Qinshi continued to stare at her. Mo Qianga clenched her teeth, pulled his head down, and quickly pressed her lips against his. "Woo." Before she could finish her sentence, he quickly pulled her back. This time, it wasn't a light touch like a dragonfly touching the water, but a deep kiss with their lips and tongues intertwined. "You." She wanted to say something, but as soon as she opened her mouth, it was blocked. The tip of his tongue slipped between her lips and teeth, entangling her tightly. Her breathing became rapid in an instant. "Don't talk." Qinshi whispered between her lips and teeth, then kissed her again. One of his arms wrapped around her waist, pressing her tightly against his body, and the other hand groped around her waist. Mo Qianga knew what he wanted to do. She felt he was too impulsive, but she didn't firmly stop him. Although she had long been prepared to be separated often, they had just gotten married after all. After making the blood oath, they also had skin contact, but that first time was almost a disaster. The two of them had lived for half of their lives, but their love affairs were hazy. They only roughly knew how to do it, so how could they know how to enjoy the beauty of skin contact? After that, although they kissed, hugged, and tangled with each other, they were no longer as close as before. Those kisses, hugs, and entanglement actually made them feel good. He finally found his belt, pulled it open, and took off the clothes one by one with ease. "Senior Marshal Brother." The moment her back touched the table, Mo Qianga tried her best to prop herself up and said hurriedly, "You should enter closed-door meditation. I told you not to talk." She lowered his head and kissed her again. Her clothes fell from his fingers. Under the cover of the Taoist robe was a woman's soft and graceful curves. Her skin was exposed to the air, but it made her a little uneasy. He noticed her uneasiness, so he held her hand comfortingly and planted a soft kiss on her collarbone. From her gentle collarbone to her delicate shoulders, he finally stopped at her chest. "Senior Marshal brother?" she gasped. This time, she didn't respond. He took off his clothes in confusion and held her waist. Chenga clenched her teeth, but she didn't feel the pain she expected. She was a little confused, but she heard she chuckling. "Concentrate." She didn't have time to think because a huge wave had already submerged them. They didn't know how much time had passed, but the two of them gradually calmed down. She sighed and put on his robe. He helped her put her clothes back on first and then fixed his own clothes. When the two of them were neatly dressed, he hugged her again reluctantly. "I'm going, and..." Chenga raised her head and looked at him. "Rest assured, I'll always be here." Chapter 311. Inside the cultivation room, Chenga sat cross-legged. The spiritual aura in her dantian was abundant, including a lot of yang spiritual aura. After such a long period of cultivation, the yang spiritual aura had smoothly entered her dantian and merged with her yin spiritual aura, forming a cycle. After forming her gold core, her dantian expanded a lot, which gave space for yin and yang spiritual aura to converge. The yang spiritual aura she obtained from she allowed her art of the origin to be truly displayed, and a real origin appeared in her body. After completing a great circulatory cycle and returning the spiritual aura to her dantian, Chenga stood up and walked out of the cultivation room. Outside the room, the wind blew gently, the bamboo leaves rustled, and Feifei squeaked and pounced on her. Xiaohuo went to cultivate again. In this virtual sky world there were only two spiritual beasts. Feifei loved to play, so it waited for Chenga to come out. It was very happy. She smiled and played with Feifei for a while. In the end, she gave it several medicinal pills to appease it and let it play with butterflies by itself. It was strange. Although she let the two spiritual beasts eat the spiritual plants in the virtual sky world, they seemed to like medicinal pills more. Perhaps medicinal pills had a better taste? Thinking of this, Chenga couldn't help but smile. She felt a little bored, so she couldn't help but look back at the bamboo house next to her. This was Shi's cultivation room. It had been 3 years since he entered closed-door meditation to form his nascent soul. His cultivation room had always been quiet, with only the continuous circulation of spiritual aura. During this time, Chenga understood one thing. People weren't afraid of not being able to get something, but losing it after getting it. In the past, when she was alone and had no worries, she didn't feel anything when she entered closed-door meditation for 5 to 6 years or even more than 10 years. However, after she got used to living with him, she always felt like she was worried about something when she suddenly lost him. Chenga just smiled when she realized this. She didn't feel annoyed at all. In the past, she always worried about what she would do if she got it and lost it later. So she worried about gains and losses. In fact, so what if she lost it? Cherishing the time she got it and slowly adapting to it after losing it, this was a truly free and easy state of mind. If she was afraid of losing it and didn't dare to get it, it would be too tangled and impossible to break through. It had been 3 years. She hadn't reached the middle stage of the core formation realm, but she wasn't far from the peak of the early stage. The benefits she obtained from dual cultivation weren't inferior to Shi's. Before she formed her gold core, Shi once healed her, so she obtained a portion of his yang spiritual aura and learned what the origin was. After their dual cultivation, yin and yang intersected, allowing her to obtain a lot of yang spiritual energy all at once. The art of the origin was truly activated. She had originally thought that after obtaining the Sunu art of origin, her cultivation speed was already extremely fast. Only after her body had truly formed origin did she realize that this was the true meaning of the art of origin. The 5 elements generated each other, and yin and yang intersected in an endless cycle. Only then did the primal chaos begin and life appear. If it was said that she originally needed to absorb yin spiritual energy from the outside world to increase her cultivation, then now she could use the origin immemorial in her body to create spiritual energy. Of course, the speed at which she produced spiritual energy was not very fast. If she wanted to cultivate normally, she would still need to absorb spiritual energy from the outside world and turn it into her own. However, the ability to produce spiritual energy on her own was unheard of in the current cultivation world. When she absorbed spiritual energy, her body was also producing spiritual energy. This way, her cultivation would always be ahead of others. This was the most heaven-defying thing. But she didn't know whether she would also be like this after obtaining her own spiritual energy. Since his art of 3 primordial cycles also required 3 auras to circulate, the principle was similar to her art of the origin, so it should be similar. Thinking up to this point, she cast her gaze towards Shi's cultivation room. Although Shi hadn't come out yet, based on the spiritual aura movement in the virtual sky world, she knew that his closed-door meditation this time was very smooth. Maybe he could really advance to the nascent soul realm smoothly. It was just that she didn't know how long it would take him. The closed-door meditation time for nascent soul formation was generally longer than for core formation, but it was different for everyone. Could range from 2 to 10 years. Before Shi entered closed-door meditation, his spiritual aura was overflowing, so it was reasonable to say that success would come naturally and wouldn't take too long. With this thought in mind, Mo Chenga started to worry again. It's been 3 years, but he still hasn't come out of closed-door meditation. He hasn't even made any movements. Could it be that he encountered some kind of problem? Regardless of whether she encountered a problem or not, she couldn't think of anything now. She absolutely couldn't disturb him during his soul formation. The only thing she could do was wait outside. At the very least, the spiritual aura inside the virtual sky world was peaceful, so he should be fine now. Mo Chenga continued to live her days of concocting medicinal pills with her eyes open and cultivating with her eyes closed. Cultivating was timeless. In the blink of an eye, another 2 years had passed. One day Mo Chenga, who was cultivating, suddenly opened her eyes. The virtual sky world was connected to her mind. Just now she sensed a sudden big change in the virtual sky world. She stood up, pushed the door open, and was immediately stunned. Inside the virtual sky world, the originally very rich spiritual aura condensed into dew-like spiritual beads. Their spiritual light illuminated the entire sky. Countless spiritual beads rushed towards Shi's cultivation room, surrounding the bamboo house. The beads sparkled brightly, making the surroundings look as beautiful as a fairyland. Mo Chenga recalled that when Martial Uncle Shenin formed his nascent soul, this kind of scene also appeared on Clear Spring Peak. She couldn't help but smile. In other words, Shi was close to successfully forming his nascent soul. Next, as long as he stabilized his mind and got rid of his inner demon, he could advance to the nascent soul realm. Thinking up to this point, her heart was filled with joy. She secretly prayed that she could pass the final test and successfully advance to the nascent soul realm. He had already failed 3 times and experienced enough setbacks. If he still didn't succeed, it would be too disheartening. Time passed day by day. The spiritual light didn't disperse for several months. During these months, Mo Chenga also stayed outside the cultivation room without leaving for even a moment. At first, Shi's cultivation room only attracted those spiritual beads slowly. Later the speed became faster and faster. Gradually it turned into a huge whirlpool. Inside this whirlpool, countless spiritual beads rushed inside, and the spiritual aura pressure also became stronger and stronger. Mo Chenga felt that she could barely stabilize her mind under this spiritual aura pressure only if she used the soul-refining art with all her strength. The stronger the spiritual aura pressure, the happier she felt. She had the soul-refining art. Even if Shi was in the peak stage of the core formation realm, he couldn't suppress her with spiritual aura pressure unless he was a nascent soul cultivator. This showed that Shi wasn't far from successfully forming his nascent soul. After an unknown amount of time, Shi gently opened his eyes in the cultivation room. A few short years were like a lifetime to him. This time he finally succeeded in walking out of his inner demon. He smiled and looked down at his hands. He finally succeeded in forming his nascent soul. He stood up, spiritual aura swirling around his body like a flying spiritual bird. His body was full of power, the power to move mountains and drain seas. This was the feeling of forming his nascent soul. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, then opened them again with a smile on his face. He gently pushed the door of the cultivation room open. Their eyes met. A few years of separation was like a lifetime to him. He greedily looked at the person in front of him, not letting go of the slightest subtle expression. He remembered that in the dream of his inner demon, he succeeded in forming his nascent soul. 100 years later she also entered the nascent soul realm. The two of them held hands and cultivated the path of immortality together. Their names shook the celestial pole and they entered the deification realm together. This time he didn't immerse himself in it for long before he jumped out of it. As long as he opened his eyes, this was their real life. Why would they need an illusion? Emo Chinga didn't speak and neither did Qin Shi. They just walked towards each other naturally and hugged each other quietly. Because of this nascent soul, they were almost separated from each other. Today they finally got what they wanted. Emo Chinga smiled slightly. She hadn't moved from this place for several months. Her voice was a little hoarse. Martial Uncle Shoujing, congratulations on advancing to the nascent soul realm. Qin Shi also smiled. He couldn't help but lower his head and bite her. Martial Uncle N? Isn't that right? Emo Chinga stood on her tiptoes and also bit him. She hugged him with her arms and teased, advancing to the nascent soul realm and becoming a Lord Taoist. From now on you won't be counted in the sect. Martial Uncle Shoujing, you can't run away from the title of an old cow eating cradle grass. Then you can't run away. Qin Shi hugged her waist, lifted her up and kissed her. Never white hair against red makeup, never afraid of a pear blossom crushing a begonia. After an unknown amount of time, the breathless kiss finally confirmed each other's existence. Qin Shi held Emo Chinga in his arms and sat directly on the step she was sitting on before. How long have you been waiting outside? Not long. I don't remember. Don't remember? Qin Shi lowered his head. You really don't remember or you don't want to tell me? Emo Chinga rolled her eyes and smiled. Since you know I don't want to tell you, why did you ask me? All right. Qin Shi sighed. He knew he couldn't ask her if she didn't want to tell him, so he changed the topic. How long did it take me to form my nascent soul? 5 years. Emo Chinga asked, did it go smoothly? Qin Shi nodded happily. Very smoothly. There were almost no twists and turns. However, I spent a lot of time fusing with the Yin spiritual aura, so it took me 5 years. It's good that it went smoothly. Emo Chinga was silent for a while, then suddenly said, at that time I was really afraid that something would go wrong after you broke your gold core. If his gold core broke and he couldn't form his nascent soul, his cultivation level would go down the drain. If he failed to form his gold core he could keep trying, but forming his nascent soul wasn't like that. The risk of failure was too great. During this time she also thought about what would happen if he failed and his cultivation level was damaged. In the end she only strengthened her conviction. The nascent soul was a path cultivators like them who yearned for the great Tao had to take. Even if there was a risk of having their gold core broken and their cultivation destroyed, shouldn't they still try to form their nascent souls? Loving each other didn't mean they had to become timid. Instead they had to walk on with more courage. How could that be? Qin Shi stared at her with a faint smile and said softly, I want to walk on the great Tao of immortality with you. He rarely said sweet words, but he had many vows hidden in such words. Emo Chinga smiled and said, rest assured. In 100 years at most, I'll also form my nascent soul. Then we'll form our deification together. 100 years. He stared at her without blinking, but he suddenly smiled and said, 100 years later, you won't be 200 years old yet. Are you so sure you'll become the youngest nascent soul cultivator in the celestial pole? Of course. Emo Chinga said without blushing, I have aptitude that's rarely seen in thousands of years, and I also have fated chances that haven't appeared in tens of thousands of years in the celestial pole. Why can't I become the youngest nascent soul cultivator in the celestial pole? Chapter 312. Emo Chinga was very confident that she could advance to the nascent soul realm within 100 years. With her aptitude, the virtual sky world, and now with Qin Shi, she was very sure that she could advance to the nascent soul realm within 100 years as long as there were no accidents. Of course, the matter of forming a nascent soul wasn't decided solely by talent. She understood this point, so during these 100 years she definitely had to work hard in her cultivation. After Qin Shi finished his chores he asked Emo Chinga, since I've successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm, why weren't there any celestial phenomena when I came out? When Qin Shi advanced to the nascent soul realm, almost all the spiritual aura in the virtual sky world turned into spiritual beads. But apart from that there were no thunderstorms or spiritual objects condensed from spiritual aura, so it really didn't look like the advanced stage of the nascent soul realm. Emo Chinga already encountered this problem when she advanced to the nascent soul realm. She said, the virtual sky world is a closed space, so how could there be celestial phenomena? When I advanced to the nascent soul realm, there weren't any celestial phenomena until I came out of the virtual sky world. I see. Qin Shi asked again, how's the situation outside? Can we go out now? Emo Chinga didn't answer. Instead, she cast a spell to open the sky of the virtual sky world. The The sky was red and the ground was black. Demonic Mountain seemed to be a different world compared to before they entered the virtual sky world. Fortunately, the lightning, thunder, and the falling rocks had all stopped. It was just stabilized a year ago, but there are still a lot of drifting restrictions, Mo Chenga said. In the past year, no restrictions have collapsed. That's good. She stared at the outside world and said, in that case we can prepare to go out. Mo Chenga was a little confused. We're going out now? There are still a lot of restrictions outside. She smiled and glanced at her. Have you forgotten? I've advanced to the nascent soul realm now, so these small restrictions are no longer a threat to me. Mo Chenga thought about it and smiled. I haven't gotten used to it yet. Although Demonic Mountain was dangerous for nascent soul cultivators, as long as they didn't go to dangerous places like the depths of Immortal's ruins, there wouldn't be any danger. Originally, the two of them were trapped here. If they wanted to get out, they had to solve a lot of things. Now that she had advanced to the nascent soul realm, those problems were no longer a problem, such as these restrictions and the way to get out. Back then, when Shi and Yihai were trapped on Demonic Mountain, it was Yihai who used all his spiritual aura to help Shi escape. Now that Shi had advanced to the nascent soul realm, he could rely on his own cultivation level to break the restrictions once he left Demonic Mountain. However, when they thought back to such peaceful days, both of them felt reluctant to part. Several days later, the two of them finished preparing everything and came out of the virtual sky world. As soon as she left the virtual sky world, she felt the fierce gales. Shi frowned. With a wave of his sleeve, a wisp of spiritual aura surged up, blocking the gales outside. Then he got on the flying cloud and headed towards Immortal's ruins together. Along the way, the two of them saw a lot of skeletons. Some of them even had Chenkuan bags, magic weapons, and other things scattered around them. Mo Chenga didn't hesitate to put them all into her bag. She didn't find any strange things on this trip to Demonic Mountain, but her harvest wasn't small. 10 years ago, before they escaped into the virtual sky world, the two of them picked up a lot of things. Moreover, this time many cultivators were involved in the restrictions and died here. Now that the restrictions were stable, these people's belongings became theirs again. Watching Mo Chenga happily picking up the scattered Chenkuan bags, she couldn't help but find it funny. You have a unique treasure like the virtual sky world and you usually have the support of the sect, so you don't lack spirit stones, do you? Why do you still like picking up things so much? Mo Chenga said confidently, you've never lacked spirit stones, so of course you don't know the pain of lacking spirit stones. The things are right in front of me, so it'd be a waste not to pick them up. When she wandered around with second uncle, she wished she could split one spirit stone into two. This kind of pain of lacking spirit stones had always been engraved in her heart, so it was impossible for her to turn a blind eye to these Chenkuan bags. As they walked and picked up things, the two of them slowly headed towards Immortal's ruins. After the previous earthquake, the scenery of Demonic Mountain changed completely, so it took them a long time to find the right way. Fortunately, tens of thousands of feet peak was split in two during the collapse of the restrictions, so they could directly fly over the remaining height without having to be as careful as when they came. When they arrived at tens of thousands of feet peak and returned to Immortal's ruins, Mo Chenga asked, Senior Marshal Brother, is there any danger in breaking the restrictions here? They were trapped in the virtual sky world, and the entrance to Demonic Mountain had long been closed. If they wanted to go out, they could only go through the place she discovered. Back then, in order to break the restrictions, she used the secret technique of the art of 3 primordial cycles to temporarily raise his cultivation level to the nascent soul realm. After he went out, his vitality was greatly damaged, and his cultivation level directly fell back to the aura refining realm. It took him more than 10 years to recover his vitality. She knew what she was worried about, so he said with a smile, Don't worry, the process of breaking the restrictions isn't dangerous. I'm a real nascent soul cultivator now, so I won't get hurt. Mo Chenga was a little relieved. He had just advanced to the nascent soul realm and hadn't stabilized his realm yet. If he got hurt again, he wouldn't be the same as before he formed his nascent soul. Let's go this way. After searching for a while, they finally found the right place. She pulled her and flew towards the restrictions. It had been 10 years since the last time Demonic Mountain opened, but the turbulence it caused still hadn't subsided. Demonic Mountain had existed in the celestial pole for millions of years since ancient times. There were also records of exploration for more than 100,000 years. Countless people had died there, but there had never been so many deaths. More than 90 years ago, the last time Demonic Mountain opened, the great restrictions collapsed and many cultivators died inside. At that time, the whole celestial pole was in an uproar, calling it a disaster that hadn't happened in thousands of years. But no one expected that the next time Demonic Mountain opened, there would be even more deaths. Except for those who left in advance, all the aura refining and foundation building cultivators died on Demonic Mountain. None of them escaped. The core formation cultivators fared better, but only 20 to 30% of them escaped. Even half of the nascent soul cultivators died inside. Of course, the collapse of the restrictions wasn't the main reason why the nascent soul cultivators died. The reason why so many nascent soul cultivators died was because they fought fiercely in Jade Palace. It was just that ordinary cultivators, even ordinary disciples of big sects, didn't know this reason. Ordinary cultivators only knew that the last time Demonic Mountain opened, more than 30 nascent soul cultivators entered one after another, but less than 20 of them came out alive. Among them, there were more than 10 nascent soul cultivators who died, and 5 or 6 of them were from the 7 great cultivation groups. This number shocked the Celestial Pole. Even Tiandao sect, the number 1 cultivation group in the Celestial Pole, only had 7 nascent soul cultivators. In that case, it was equivalent to each of the 7 great cultivation groups losing 1 nascent soul cultivator. Among the 7 great cultivation groups, it took several hundred years for each of them to produce a nascent soul cultivator. This kind of loss was more serious than any demonic beast. In the past 10 years, almost all the cultivators in the Celestial Pole sighed with emotion. 70 years ago they experienced a rarely seen demonic beast riot, and now they also experienced 2 riots on Demonic Mountain. The cultivation level of the Celestial Pole would most likely take several hundred years to recover. Chapter 313. This year, it was time for Tiandao sect to hold the Immortals Assembly again. Mount Yuheng was bustling with people coming and going. 10 years ago, Tiandao sect lost a nascent soul cultivator and several core formation cultivators on Demonic Mountain, as well as a large number of low-level disciples. Tiandao sect's strength was greatly reduced, and its reputation as the number 1 sect in the Celestial Pole was in danger. Because of this, the higher-ups of Tiandao sect made a prompt decision to open the mountain gate and recruit disciples. In the past, although this decision couldn't immediately solve the problem of the decline in strength, Tiandao sect would slowly recover its strength after more than 100 years and still hold the position of the number 1 sect in the Celestial Pole. But more than 70 years ago, after the demonic beast riot, all the cultivation sects had just recovered their vitality. Then they suffered a great disaster and opened their mountain gates one after another. In the past it was difficult to enter the mountain gate with many disciples, but now, it immediately became a situation where all the sects fought for disciples. Although Tiandao sect was known as the number 1 sect, its reputation had declined, and it couldn't guarantee that it would get enough outstanding disciples in this situation. Because of this, Master Taoist Yanglin, the new sect head of Tiandao sect, almost had his hair turn white from worry. Although he was the sect leader, he still had to answer to the nascent soul Grand Supreme Elders, and he also had to deal with the power struggle. If he couldn't solve this problem, the nascent soul Grand Supreme Elders might be unhappy, and the position of sect leader would be changed. Although the position of sect head was a punching bag, it was very important to the interests of his family, so he couldn't quit it even if he wanted to. Thinking of this, Master Taoist Yanglin somewhat envied those cultivators who cultivated hard. Although they didn't have the support of their families and cultivated hard, they could wholeheartedly devote themselves to cultivation without paying attention to these mundane things. This was also a blessing. However, although Tiandao sect wasn't as powerful as before, it was still much better than those small and medium-sized cultivation sections. As soon as the Immortals Assembly was announced, countless low-level cultivators suddenly rushed to Mount Yuheng. He only hoped that among these low-level cultivators, there would be a few disciples with outstanding talents. That way he could explain to the Grand Supreme Elders. On Mount Yuheng, among the low-level cultivators waiting for the Immortals Assembly, someone shouted, "Wu Laosen, why are you here?" The person who was called was a cultivator in his 30s with a pale face and a short beard. His cultivation level was only in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm. If it was in the past, with this kind of cultivation he wouldn't even need to think about participating in the Tiandao sect's Immortals Assembly. He could only try his luck at a small cultivation sect. It just so happened that they came at a good time. In the past 10 years Tiandao sect held an Immortals Assembly almost every year, and many disciples in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm were able to join the sect. The man called Wu Laosan turned his head and looked at the lean man who called him. He curled his lips and said, "If you Li Xiang can come, why can't I Wu Sandy come?" This situation was not uncommon in the Immortals Assembly in recent years. Originally, if the Immortals Assembly was held every 3 or 10 years, a large number of young cultivators from all over the world would gather at that time. Most of them didn't know each other. However, since it was held every year, the number of cultivators participating in the Immortals Assembly was limited. Naturally, there would be a lot of acquaintances. The lean man named Li Xiang grinned when he heard Wu Sandy's words. He put his hand on Wu Sandy's shoulder and said, "Wu Laosan, we've known each other since childhood. I'm just saying hello. I don't mean anything else. Don't misunderstand." Misunderstand? Wu Sandy cast a glance at Li Xiang and said disdainfully, "Forget it. If Li Xiang's words can be trusted, the sun will rise from the west." Hey, what do you mean by that? Li Xiang patted his shoulder hard. "Let's forget about the past. We're old acquaintances. It must be fate that brought us together to meet in this Immortals Assembly. Come. Let's have a chat. Who knows, we might even be able to give each other some advice." Wu Sandy looked at him suspiciously for a while, but he was eventually persuaded. Right, they were all here to participate in the Immortals Assembly. Although they had conflict since childhood, they didn't hate each other. It would be good to have a chat. Thereupon, the two of them found a corner and began to talk about the Immortals Assembly. They talked about cultivation and exchanged information. They were both in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm. In the past, they really wouldn't have had the chance to enter a big sect like Tiandao sect. They couldn't let go of such an opportunity. Who knew when Tiandao sect would receive enough disciples, and it wouldn't be as easy to enter as it was now. After they finished talking about what they heard, Li Xiang still wanted to continue. He asked, "Wu Laosan, all 7 great cultivation groups are recruiting disciples. Why did you also come to Tiandao sect?" Wu Sandy stroked his mustache and snorted. "What other reason could there be? It's close. Besides, Tiandao sect is known as the #1 cultivation group, so it's better than other cultivation groups." No. Li Xiang shook his hand and said, "Wu Laosan, you're wrong." "Wrong?" Wu Sandy glared at him. "What's wrong? Among the 7 great cultivation groups, there's no need to mention Danding School. It suffered heavy losses 70 years ago, so it's only a medium-sized cultivation group now. Lingshou sect specializes in beast-taming techniques, so ordinary cultivators like us who don't have talent in beast-taming would find it hard to enter. As for Zhengfa sect, it specializes in water techniques, but we don't have water spiritual roots. As for Biyun sect, I'm not a female cultivator, so their requirements for male cultivators are much higher. Gujian sect isn't bad, but it's a sword cultivation group, so it won't be easy for them to cultivate again. In this case, the remaining ones are Xianqing School and Tiandao sect. Although Xianqing School isn't bad, it's still a bit inferior to Tiandao sect." Wrong. Li Xiang made 3 mistakes in a row and interrupted Wu Sandy. He squinted at him and said, "When it comes to cultivation, I, Li Xiang, may not be as good as you, but when it comes to these things, you can't see them as clearly as I can." Although Wu Sandy wasn't convinced, Li Xiang admitted that his cultivation wasn't as good as his, which made him feel very comfortable, so he didn't care about such a trivial matter as being interrupted. But he still felt he was right. "What's wrong? Why don't you tell me?" "In fact, what you said before was correct. Danding School and Lingshou sect are either too weak or they're not suitable for us. But you said Xianqing School is a bit weaker than Tiandao sect, so you're wrong." "Why?" Wu Sandy glared at him and said, "Xianqing School has always been a bit weaker than Tiandao sect. Although Tiandao sect lost 1 nascent soul cultivator 10 years ago, they still have 6, and 2 of them are in the late stage of the nascent soul realm. Xianqing School only has 1 late-stage nascent soul cultivator. Although no nascent soul cultivator died 10 years ago and there are still 5 of them now, 1 late-stage nascent soul cultivator is equivalent to several early-stage nascent soul cultivators. This strength is obvious at a glance." "You've only seen a little bit on the surface." Li Xiang said proudly. "Yes, the strength of nascent soul cultivators in Tiandao sect is indeed a bit stronger than that of Xianqing School, but have you thought about what will happen in the next several hundred years?" Wu Sandy looked at him suspiciously. "What? Do you want to say that many Xianqing School cultivators will advance to the nascent soul realm? But Tiandao sect also has many talented disciples. How can it be worse than Xianqing School? It's not bad. This was Tiandao sect after all." Li Xiang's loud discussion seemed to indicate that Tiandao sect was inferior to Xianqing school, which had long attracted other people's attention. Those who came to participate in Tiandao sect's Immortals Assembly all had a good impression of Tiandao sect, so their gazes were already filled with hostility when they heard Li Xiang's words. Li Xiang was a slippery person, so he naturally noticed this. He said unhurriedly, "When did I say Tiandao sect was inferior to Xianqing school? What I said was, it's still too early for you to think Xianqing school lost to Tiandao sect. Yes, Tiandao sect is a bit stronger in terms of nascent soul cultivators, but the development of a sect doesn't only rely on nascent soul cultivators, but also on thousands of low-level disciples. The people around them were all low-level aura refining cultivators who wanted to enter the sect." Hearing this made them feel comfortable and less hostile towards Li Xiang. Li Xiang continued, "Have you ever thought about how many low-level disciples Tiandao sect lost during the demonic beast riot and the 2 disasters on Demonic Mountain? The number of disciples in the aura refining and foundation building realms was at least 1,000. Also, there were 7 or 8 core formation cultivators. So this is why Tiandao sect is stronger than Xianqing school. It has thousands more aura refining disciples, 100 more foundation building disciples, and almost 10 more core formation cultivators. It's because it has more low-level disciples that it has more potential. Tiandao sect always has 1 or 2 more nascent soul cultivators than Xianqing school." These words attracted the attention of the low-level cultivators around them. Many people gathered around them, and those who didn't also pricked up their ears to listen. Li Xiang became even more proud and said loudly, "But do you know that Xianqing school didn't lose any aura refining disciples during the demonic beast riot? Also, during the 2 disasters on Demonic Mountain, few low-level disciples participated because it was too far away from Demonic Mountain. In this way, Xianqing school's number of aura refining disciples to core formation cultivators isn't worse than Tiandao sect at all, maybe even a bit more." At this point, someone interjected, "Fellow Taoist, how do you know about these things? You're not a sect disciple, so how do you know the number of disciples in a big sect?" Li Xiang glanced at the cultivator who raised the question, raised his head and said, "Brother, you don't care about these things, so of course you don't know. No matter how big a sect is, it doesn't have more than 10,000 people. Small cultivators like us can't know the exact number of cultivators, but we can estimate it." Someone in the crowd said, "Yes, fellow Taoist is right. This isn't a top secret. We can estimate the number of disciples these big sects accept every year." Yes, someone echoed. Li Xiang was extremely happy and said, "Fellow Taoist is right. We estimate it from the number of disciples they accept." Enough. Someone couldn't bear his proud manner and said, "If you have something to say, just say it. What's the point of talking about this?" Although the words weren't polite, they were waiting to hear it, so Li Xiang didn't get angry. He continued to say, "Okay, let's continue talking about business. In terms of the number of low-level disciples, Xianqing school isn't worse than Tiandao sect, so in terms of potential, it can also be said to be equal. But there's one more thing. I don't know if you've noticed, but Xianqing school has suffered very little or no losses in these events. This is very important for a disciple's cultivation mentality. With this in mind, I'm afraid the potential of Xianqing school's low-level disciples will surpass that of Tiandao sect." Li Xiang looked around and saw that all the cultivators were silent and didn't object to his opinion, so he continued to say, "Then what's Xianqing school's disadvantage now? Even its nascent soul cultivators are still suppressed by Tiandao sect. Most of Tiandao sect's nascent soul cultivators are facing death, while Xianqing school's strength isn't as good as Tiandao sect's, but most of their lifespans haven't passed the halfway mark. Considering this, I don't think I need to say whose future is better, right? I dare say that in the next 100 years, if Xianqing school is the first to produce a nascent soul cultivator, their momentum will flourish, and the title of the #1 sect in the celestial pole will be theirs." The crowd was silent. After a while, someone said sarcastically, "Since that's the case, why doesn't this fellow Taoist go to Xianqing school? He even came to participate in Tiandao sect's Immortals Assembly." That person was obviously a supporter of Tiandao sect. Li Xiang didn't get angry. He smiled and said, "Brother, you haven't been to Xianqing school, right? I'm telling you, Xianqing school didn't lose many low-level disciples. They've recovered their strength in recent years. Although they've also opened their gates in the past few years, they've been recruiting disciples just as strictly. I, Li Xiang, am a little clever, but when it comes to cultivation I'm not worth mentioning. I really don't have the confidence." That person sneered again. Are you so sure that Shenqing School will produce a nascent soul cultivator first? Maybe it'll be Tiandao sect. At that time they'll still have more nascent soul cultivators than Shenqing School, and they'll also be stronger than them. They won't be able to snatch the number one sect in the celestial pole no matter what. I didn't say Shenqing School would be the first. Li Xiang said innocently, I'm just analyzing what might happen. I've always said it might happen. Everyone heard it, right? The onlookers nodded. What he said was indeed possible. But although it was only a possibility, Li Xiang's analysis was very reasonable. Among the onlookers, some people who were quite confident in their cultivation level thought that if Shenqing School really didn't lower their conditions for recruiting disciples, it meant that they were very confident. Should they go to Shenqing School to try it out first? Seeing that the onlookers all agreed with Li Xiang, the person was annoyed and said angrily, just wait. Tiandao sect will definitely produce a nascent soul cultivator first. At that time Shenqing School will still be the second. Li Xiang smiled and said, brother, this kind of thing is really hard to say. It might be Tiandao sect or Shenqing School. But in the end it's their big sect's business. We little cultivators can just chat when we have nothing to do. After all, we haven't even entered a sect yet. Yes. In front of outsiders, Wu Sandy also stood on Li Xiang's side. We're just chatting. Fellow Taoist, you don't need to be excited. At this point, a sudden clap of thunder was heard. The sky suddenly flashed with dazzling golden light, the wind and clouds surged, and the thunder rumbled endlessly. All the cultivators looked up and saw countless spiritual lights flashing in the sky. Among them, spiritual birds were flying and auspicious clouds were surging. A strong spiritual aura pressure shrouded them. The spiritual aura of the little cultivators suddenly became chaotic, making it hard for them to breathe. Some people with weaker cultivation levels even vomited blood and knelt down. The crowd began to stir. Someone shouted, "What's wrong? What's that?" Then a knowledgeable person shouted, "Celestial phenomenon. It's celestial phenomenon." Someone formed his nascent soul. The cultivators who heard Li Xiang's discussion were secretly surprised. Someone from Tiandao sect formed his nascent soul again? It seemed Shenqing School really couldn't become the number one sect. Li Xiang and Wu Sandy glanced at each other with bitterness in their eyes. It couldn't be such a coincidence, right? Then didn't they work for nothing? But this was indeed the celestial phenomenon of nascent soul formation. In the sky, the golden light became more and more dazzling and gradually dyed the auspicious clouds red like fire. The auspicious clouds surged and slowly formed a shape. A pair of wings spread, tail feathers raised, and a clear cry. A divine beast phoenix. Chapter 3:14. Before Taoist Master Yanglin could finish sighing, he saw the celestial phenomena of nascent soul formation all over the sky, and he was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped. Just as he was wondering why no one in the sect was doing closed-door meditation to form his nascent soul, he received a summon from the head Grand Supreme Elder. He had no choice but to hurriedly order his disciples to inquire about it, and then he went to see the head Grand Supreme Elder first. Greetings, Supreme Elders. As soon as he entered the abode of the head Grand Supreme Elder Lu Dingyuan, he was stared at by 4 nascent soul elders, causing Taoist Master Yanglin to tremble with fear. There were 4 nascent soul elders, and one of them was a late-stage nascent soul cultivator. Even if they didn't deliberately release their spiritual aura, a middle-stage core formation cultivator like him would find it hard to remain calm and collected. The Tiandao sect originally had 7 nascent soul elders. One of them died 10 years ago during the extraterrestrial demon war, and another was seriously injured and was now in seclusion. Of the remaining 5, only one wasn't present. It seemed that the appearance of the nascent soul celestial phenomenon had shocked the higher-ups of the Tiandao sect. "Dispense with the formalities," said Grand Elder Lu Dingyuan, who sat in the seat of honor. He looked young, no more than 30 years old. He had a 3-inch beard and wore a Taoist crown and a Taoist robe. He looked like an immortal. But these were just appearances. Perfected Master Yanglin knew that this head Supreme Elder actually cultivated in devil arts. He was kind when he was in a good mood, but if he was in a bad mood he would be very irritable. Therefore, although Master Taoist Yanglin said that there was no need for formalities, he still bowed respectfully and asked, "May I know what instructions Grand Supreme Elders have for me? Do I still need to instruct you?" Among the 4 nascent soul elders, Fairy Fengqing, the one with the most fiery temper, spoke up. She glanced outside, her phoenix eyes slanting. Such a big movement. As the sect leader, you shouldn't be unaware, right? Of course, Immortal Yanglin knew the reason, but he just asked out of politeness. He didn't expect to get it wrong again, so he could only answer with a bitter face, I don't know either. There are a total of 5 senior martial brothers and sisters in the late stage of core formation in our sect. 2 of them are close to the peak stage of core formation, but these 2 senior martial brothers haven't said anything about forming their nascent souls. Disciple was just thinking about who is forming their nascent souls, so I only had time to send someone to inquire. Hearing those words, the 4 nascent soul realm elders looked at each other. Of course they knew about these things. It was just that there were some things that the sect leader knew more about, so they summoned him to ask. Grand Supreme Elders, Taoist Yanglin mustered up his courage and said, Disciple discovered that the celestial phenomenon appeared in the North Peak. The North Peak is connected to Demonic Mountain, and there's no Immortal's Cave there at all. So Disciple boldly guessed that the celestial phenomenon isn't from our sect, or there's some secret behind it. After all, he was the sect leader. His words were quite insightful. Hearing this, the 4 nascent soul elders looked at Lu Dingyuan, the late nascent soul cultivator. Stroking his beard, Lu Dingyuan replied, That's possible. Everyone knows the situation of the core formation cultivators in our sect. It's not a good time for them to form their nascent soul, yet the celestial phenomenon appeared in the North Mountain. In my opinion, it's most likely not a cultivator from our sect. Senior Martial Brother Lu. Fairy Fengqing said with a frown, Who dares to form their nascent soul on the territory of my Tiandao sect? He was too daring. No matter what, we're the #1 sect in the celestial pole. There are so many nascent soul cultivators in our sect, and we also have Senior Martial Brother Lu and Senior Martial Brother Bian. How dare he? Lu Dingyuan shook his head. We'll know what's going on soon. There's no need to be anxious. After a long period of silence, the astronomical phenomenon still hadn't disappeared. The spiritual energy in the sky was even becoming more and more abundant. Dazzling golden light danced in the air. Suddenly, Fairy Fengqing exclaimed and stood up abruptly in surprise. Senior brothers, look. The other 3 nascent soul realm cultivators looked up at the same time and saw the auspicious clouds on the horizon forming the shape of a phoenix. Then he heard a clear cry like the cry of a phoenix. Phoenix celestial phenomenon. Lu Dingyuan also couldn't sit still. When cultivators formed their nascent souls, celestial phenomena would appear, and the auspicious clouds inside the celestial phenomena would take the shape of various spiritual beasts. When he formed his nascent soul, what appeared was a bishi, and at that time, it already shook East Kunwu. Swan and I was one of the 9 sons of the dragon, the descendant of a divine beast. Sure enough, he successfully cultivated to the late stage of nascent soul. The phoenix celestial phenomenon actually appeared on this young man? What did this mean? The phoenix was a true divine beast. Lu Dingyuan made a prompt decision and immediately sent out a teleportation talisman. After a while, the teleportation talisman returned. After he put it away, his expression suddenly changed. Senior Martial Brother Lu? Fairy Fengqing asked. After a while, Lu Dingyuan's expression slowly calmed down. He stood up and said, Your Senior Martial Brother Bian already knows what's going on, so he's on his way. He glanced at his 3 junior martial brothers and sisters, who were all only in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. He sighed and said, It's Xianqing School's Qin Shoujing. He's forming his nascent soul on Demonic Mountain and just broke the restriction. What? The 3 nascent soul cultivators were still confused, but Master Taoist Yanglin's expression changed first. After all, there was a difference in realm. No matter how talented a core formation cultivator was, nascent soul cultivators wouldn't pay much attention to him. Therefore, the 3 nascent soul elders weren't too familiar with Qin Shoujing's name, but Master Taoist Yanglin was very clear about it. Upon seeing the 3 nascent soul elders' questioning gazes, Master Taoist Yanglin calmed down and explained, Martial uncles, you probably don't know, but Qin Shoujing is the disciple of Lord Taoist Jinghe of Xianqing School. He's known as a genius. He formed his gold core 78 at that time and shook the celestial pole. Oh, so it's him. One of the nascent soul cultivators said, Senior Martial Brother Lu said a few years ago that our core formation disciples were a bit worse than Xianqing schools. Qin Shoujing was one of them, right? Lu Dingyuan frowned and said in a deep voice, You don't know much, so you don't know. A few years ago, I heard he tried to form his nascent soul, so I kept this matter in mind. He failed to form his nascent soul 3 times in the past, so he came to Demonic Mountain. Later, he disappeared without a trace on Demonic Mountain. I even thought he'd already perished inside, but I didn't expect he actually came out alive and even formed his nascent soul. Master Taoist Yanglin reported, Martial Uncle Lu more than 90 years ago, Qin Shoujing also went to Demonic Mountain and came out more than 10 years after the restriction was closed. Presumably, he knew some secrets on Demonic Mountain so he could escape every time.
I see.
Lu Dingyuan pondered for a moment then shook his head and sighed.
It's really fate.
I originally thought heaven blessed Tiandao sect and let Qin Shoujing die on Demonic Mountain. I didn't expect that in the end we still lost to Xianqing School.
Alas.
Fairy Fengqing's expression turned fierce. She said, Senior Martial Brother Lu, since he just happened to appear in Tiandao sect, why don't we just kill him on the spot? Lu Dingyuan shook his head. Junior Martial Sister Feng Qin, sometimes killing people can't solve problems. Qin Jinghe must have Qin Shoujing's natal lamp. How could Qin Jinghe not know he's alive? Besides, Qin Shoujing's appearance was so big that the news couldn't be hidden. If he died in Tiandao sect, how could Xianqing School let us go? Now is the time for Tiandao sect to recuperate, not to fight. Even if the title of the #1 sect in the Celestial Pole is taken away, we can still get it back, but we can't afford to lose our disciples. What Senior Martial Brother Lu said makes sense, an early-stage nascent soul cultivator said. An early-stage nascent soul cultivator said, we have Senior Martial Brother Lu and Senior Martial Brother Bian, so Tiandao sect's power is still there. We don't need to be impatient. Fairy Fengqing wanted to say something, but Lu Dingyuan raised his hand and stopped her. They're here. At that moment, the celestial phenomenon gradually ended. Several flight lights flew over from the north peak of Mount Yuheng and stopped in front of Lu Dingyuan's Immortal's Cave. They were Lord Taoist Bian, another late-stage nascent soul cultivator from Tiandao sect, Qin Shi and Imo Tiange. In an instant, a smile appeared on Lu Dingyuan's face. He led his 3 nascent soul martial siblings and a group of disciples to welcome them. So it's fellow Taoist Shoujing Brother Taoist Jinghe's beloved disciple. It's an honor to meet you. In any case, Qin Shi had just advanced to the nascent soul realm. A late-stage nascent soul cultivator treating him with such courtesy could be considered giving him enough face, so he also politely returned the salute with Imo Tiange. I don't dare. Greetings, senior martial brothers and sisters of Tiandao sect. I had no choice but to form my nascent soul on Demonic Mountain. If I disturbed you, please forgive me. Haha, you're too kind. Lu Dingyuan felt a bit more comfortable when he heard Qin Shi calling himself a brat but actually calling himself a junior humbly. He said, this is also a fated chance. Fellow Taoist Shoujing, please come in and have a seat. Qin Shi smiled, gave Imo Tiange a meaningful look and followed Lu Dingyuan into his Immortal's Cave. Imo Tiange understood what he meant. Since Tiandao sect was treating them with courtesy, there shouldn't be any danger, so they could go in boldly without worry. After they entered Lu Dingyuan's Immortal's Cave, Lu Dingyuan introduced the nascent soul cultivators present to Qin Shi one by one. After greeting them, he saw Imo Tiange following behind Qin Shi, so he asked, this is? Qin Shi smiled and said, this is my junior martial sister and also my Tao companion. Her Taoist name is Qingwei. Oh. Lu Dingyuan was a bit surprised. Although most nascent soul male cultivators took core formation female cultivators as their Tao companions, Imo Tiange's cultivation level was indeed a bit low. But in the end this was other people's business, so Lu Dingyuan just smiled and didn't say much. He just glanced at his disciples and told them to treat Imo Tiange with the same courtesy. Everyone sat down and served tea. Lu Dingyuan said, fellow Taoist Shoujing, not only did you escape from death this time, but you also formed your nascent soul. You must have a lot of stories, right? Can you tell us? Qin Shi smiled. I was just lucky. 10 years ago, when the restrictions on Demonic Mountain collapsed, my junior martial sister and I happened to not be affected, but we were trapped inside and couldn't get out. During these 10 years, Demonic Mountain was extremely unstable, so we had to find a safe place to do closed-door meditation. Fortunately, I obtained some treasures inside and successfully formed my nascent soul, which allowed me to escape. Really? When the restrictions on Demonic Mountain collapsed, only a few people escaped. Fellow Taoist Shoujing was really lucky. Lu Dingyuan obviously didn't believe him, and Qin Shi also didn't intend to make him believe him. This kind of thing was tacit. Therefore he just smiled and asked, Senior Martial Brother Lu, we've been trapped in Demonic Mountain all these years. May I know the situation in Kunwu now? How many people escaped? Is my master, Lord Taoist Jinghe, doing well? Fellow Taoist Shoujing, rest assured. Lu Dingyuan answered with a smile, fellow Taoist Jinghe was really lucky. He escaped with fellow Taoist Huayan from your group, and he only suffered minor injuries. On the other hand, I heard fellow Taoist Huayan was seriously injured. I don't know how he's been these years. Oh, thank you for telling me, Senior Marshal Brother Lu. Upon hearing this news, both Qin Shi and Mo Tiange breathed sighs of relief. At least they were still alive. Chapter 315. They only stayed in Tiandao sect for one day. On the second day, Mo Tiange and Qin Shi went back to Xianqing school. What they found interesting was that Xianqing school sent 2 disciples to Tiandao sect's Immortals Assembly to fan the flames, trying to persuade some cultivators with good aptitudes to go to Xianqing school. Coincidentally, when they talked about which of Tiandao sect or Xianqing school would have a nascent soul cultivator, they broke the restriction on Demonic Mountain and triggered the nascent soul celestial phenomenon, making the 2 disciples think that Tiandao sect just happened to have a nascent soul cultivator and fell short of success. Soon the truth spread like wildfire. After learning that it was Xianqing school cultivators who triggered the nascent soul celestial phenomenon, a group of cultivators withdrew from Tiandao sect's Immortals Assembly and wanted to go to Xianqing school to try their luck. The 2 disciples were overjoyed and soon contacted them. Since they were Xianqing school disciples and had a heavy responsibility, they didn't refuse and took the 2 foundation building disciples with them. If they flew back to Xianqing school on their own, it would probably take them several months. The appearance of the nascent soul celestial phenomenon saved them a lot of time and effort, and they directly completed their task. The 2 disciples were extremely grateful to Qin Shi, and they were also very curious about Mo Tiange. Qin Shi had a cold personality and was now a nascent soul cultivator, so the 2 disciples didn't dare to ask too many questions. Seeing that Mo Tiange was quite kind, they surrounded her and asked all sorts of questions, calling her martial uncle very affectionately. After being trapped on Demonic Mountain for 10 years, Mo Tiange also wanted to inquire about the outside world, so she chatted with the 2 foundation building disciples along the way. Martial Uncle Qingwei, I heard you formed your gold core before you were 100 years old. You're really amazing. We've heard about you before, but we never had the chance to meet you. Now that we can meet you, we're really lucky. The foundation building disciple named Li Yang's mouth seemed to be smeared with honey, and he could flatter her easily. Of course, Mo Tiange didn't take his words seriously. She just thought it was quite interesting, so she said with a smile, "Are you 2 specialized in carrying out a glib talk mission?" He's very eloquent. Another disciple named Wu De felt a bit ashamed when he heard that. He said, "Martial Uncle Qingwei, please don't mind him. We often go to other cultivation groups to spread some news. This brat is used to it, so compliments come out of his mouth easily. He didn't mean to offend you." As he said that, he glared at Li Yang. "Martial Uncle is one of us, so don't talk like that." Li Yang rubbed his head and revealed an embarrassed smile. "Martial Uncle Qingwei, although disciples' words are compliments, they're all true. You and Martial Uncle Shou Jing. Oh no, Martial Ancestor Shou Jing, are legends in the sect. We've been looking forward to meeting you for a long time, but unfortunately, you 2 are elusive. It's difficult to meet you even if we wanted to." That was the truth. There was no need to mention Qin Shi. He rarely appeared in front of people. Even among the disciples who had been in the school for several decades, very few people had seen him. Mo Tiange also rarely went out. Aside from the time she took care of secular affairs for Lord Taoist Jinghe more than 60 years ago, she often went back and forth between peaks to handle affairs. In the past few decades, she was either traveling outside or cultivating in closed-door meditation. Mo Tiange smiled and changed the topic. "You 2 work for the Steward's Hall, so you must be well informed. May I know how our sect has been in the past 10 years? Our sect's situation? Wu De thought for a moment, then answered, "Martial Uncle, do you want to ask about our current strength and reputation? It's very good. Speaking of which, it's fortunate that we're far away from Demonic Mountain in western Kunwu. Every time Demonic Mountain opens, although several core formation martial uncles and nascent soul grandmasters go there, disciples below the foundation building realm rarely participate, so our losses aren't great. 10 years ago, when Demonic Mountain's great restriction collapsed, we only lost 2 core formation martial uncles and several foundation building cultivators, which is much better than other cultivation groups." Mo Tiange had already learned from Tiandao sect that her master and martial uncle Huayan were fine, but she still asked again, "Are the 2 nascent soul grandmasters okay?" Li Yang answered first, "Don't worry, martial uncle. The 2 nascent soul grandmasters escaped in time, but they were both slightly injured. Mo Chenga and Qin Shi were mentally prepared for this, so they didn't take it seriously and just asked, "Are they okay now?" Unexpectedly, Li Yang asked, "Martial uncle, did the people of Tiandao sect tell you that Grandmaster Jinghe was slightly injured and Grandmaster Huayan was seriously injured?" "Yes." Mo Chenga raised her eyebrows and looked at Qin Shi. From what he said, could it be that the information was inaccurate? Wu sighed and said, "Martial uncle Qingwei, Grandmaster Shoujing, those words were actually released for others to hear, but the truth isn't like that. Grandmaster Huayan's injuries weren't that serious. Not only was his life not in danger, but he also didn't lose his cultivation level. I reckon he's recovered after 10 years of healing." Mo Chenga raised her eyebrows and asked, "What about Grandmaster Jinghe? Is he okay?" Sure enough, Wu continued to say, "Grandmaster Jinghe's situation isn't good. In fact, Grandmaster Jinghe tried his best to escape from Demonic Mountain with Grandmaster Huayan. Before we left, we heard that Grandmaster Jinghe was still in closed-door meditation to heal his injuries. I don't know how he's doing." Mo Chenga and Qin Shi exchanged a look and frowned, lost in thought. It turned out that the one who was seriously injured was their master, and the information circulating outside was false. This wasn't difficult to understand. Although Shanqing School had 6 nascent soul cultivators, there was only one in the late stage and one in the middle stage. Lord Taoist Jinghe's cultivation level was in the peak of the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, and his fighting strength wasn't inferior to that of a cultivator in the late stage. Needless to say, the existence of such a Lord Taoist meant to Shanqing School. With the loss of Tiandao sect's strength and Shanqing School possibly becoming the #1 sect in the celestial pole, this news was naturally concealed. Thinking up to this point, the two of them couldn't help but worry. Master was in the peak of the middle stage of the nascent soul realm now, but he was seriously injured. Would he be unable to advance to the late stage of the nascent soul realm because of this? Wu and Li Yang were observing their expressions. Upon seeing the worried expressions on their faces, they immediately said, "Martial uncle and Grandmaster don't need to worry too much. Although we can be considered core disciples of our school, we're only 2 small foundation-building cultivators. If Grandmaster Jinghe's life is really in danger, it'll be top-secret information, and he won't let us know about it." "That's right. Clear Spring Peak has been prosperous these years. I heard Grandmaster Jinghe occasionally receives disciples, so it's obviously nothing serious." After thinking for a while, Qin Shi nodded and finally said, "What you said is reasonable." Wu and Li Yang were overjoyed to be praised by a nascent soul grandmaster, so they complimented Qin Shi again. Mo Chenga was worried but also felt it was funny. Putting aside the matter about Lord Taoist Jinghe for the time being, Mo Chenga asked, "Since you know so much about the school, do you know a foundation-building disciple named Yijinji?" "Yijinji?" Li Yang asked, "Martial uncle, are you talking about Grandmaster Shoujing's inner disciple, your nephew?" Mo Chenga didn't expect Li Yang would remember him as soon as she said his name. She was pleasantly surprised. "Do you really know him?" Li Yang shook his head. "Senior Martial Brother Yi is an elite disciple among elite disciples. We're just deacons of the Steward's Hall and we often run errands outside. How could we know him? We've only seen him before." "Oh, then do you know his situation? Did he come back from his experiential learning?" Wu took over the conversation and said with a smile, "Speaking of this, it's also interesting." Mo Chenga was stunned. "What happened?" Li Yang rushed to say, "Senior Martial Brother Yi disappeared for more than 10 years and there was no news about him. Unexpectedly, one year, news suddenly came from Kuanzhong City that an individual cultivator named Wanderer Baiyu was killed by 2 foundation-building cultivators. After that, our branch in Kuanzhong City received news from Senior Martial Brother Yi." "Wanderer Baiyu?" Mo Chenga and Qin Shi exchanged glances. Both of them had astonishment in their eyes. Seeing that Mo Chenga was confused, Qin Shi said, "Wanderer Baiyu is also a member of the Individual Cultivators Alliance in Kuanzhong City. He's more than 400 years old and has a youthful appearance. Reportedly, he specializes in dual cultivation. I once guessed that the person Old Tong said he wanted you to exchange heavenly aromatic beans for chalcedony was Wanderer Baiyu." "Correct." Li Yang continued, "Grandmaster Shoujing is really experienced and knowledgeable. Wanderer Baiyu is an individual cultivator in the core formation realm from Kuanzhong City. According to the senior martial brothers I met, he's obviously an old man, but he looks like a youngster. Moreover, he's fastidious like a woman. His reputation isn't very good.
Many people say he uses the plucking technique to maintain his youth. Emo Chenga nodded. What happened to Jinji in the end? Wu De continued, speaking of which, senior martial brother Yi was really unlucky. When he traveled to Kuanzhong City, he accidentally saved a woman. As it turned out, that woman was the human furnace that Wanderer Baiyu fancied, so he captured her as well. Fortunately, due to senior martial brother Ye's identity, Wanderer Baiyu didn't dare to kill him. In order to protect that woman, the two of them were imprisoned by Wanderer Baiyu for more than 10 years. After listening to the whole story, Emo Chinga was shocked at first, then she became furious. This Wanderer Baiyu. How dare he? He actually dared to imprison a disciple of Shenqing's school. Who said he didn't? Later on, I don't know what method senior martial brother Yi used, but he actually killed Wanderer Baiyu, a realm above him, and only then did he escape. Li Yang shook his head and said, according to the senior martial brothers in Kuanzhong City's branch, when senior martial brother Yi and that woman escaped, both of them were tortured beyond recognition. What happened next? Qin Shi frowned and asked, Wanderer Baiyu imprisoned a disciple of Shenqing's school. Did the school deal with him? Of course. Knowing this Grandmaster Shoujing only had one inner disciple, Li Yang hastily said, as soon as senior martial brother Yi returned to Mount Taikang, the whole school was shocked. Grandmaster Jinghe personally gave the order and almost massacred the Individual Cultivators Alliance in Kuanzhong City. At that time, this matter shook Kunwu, and the Individual Cultivators Alliance was exterminated overnight. Later, Grandmaster Jinghe calmed down and agreed to let the irrelevant people go. Now, the Individual Cultivators Alliance in Kuanzhong City has already been reorganized. Emo Chenga and Qin Shi finally felt their anger dissipate. If Wanderer Baiyu was still alive, the two of them would have immediately killed their way to Kuanzhong City. Jinji was their only disciple, but he was almost tortured to death by someone else. Just thinking about it made Emo Chenga and Qin Shi furious. Since Wanderer Baiyu cultivated the art of plucking and was a member of the Individual Cultivators Alliance, he was most likely the old friend Tong Tianyun mentioned. She and Tong Tianyun made an agreement to obtain heavenly aromatic beans from Demonic Mountain in exchange for 1,000-year-old chalcedony. If she met Wanderer Baiyu before that, Jinji probably wouldn't have suffered so much. Fortunately, Jinji escaped. Otherwise, she really would have regretted it for the rest of her life. Chapter 316. Worried about the two foundation-building disciples, Qin Shi and Emo Chenga spent 7 days to reach Shenqing School. As soon as they approached Mount Taikang, Emo Chenga saw several nascent Soul Lord Taoists and dozens of core formation masters in the air from a distance. She looked at Qin Shi suspiciously. What's going on? Qin Shi didn't understand what was going on either, but Wu De and Li Yang answered with a smile, of course to welcome Grandmaster Shoujing. Both of them were stunned. Several nascent Soul Lord Taoists and dozens of core formation cultivators actually came to welcome a nascent soul cultivator. The leader was even the head Grand Supreme Elder, Lord Taoist Jinyang. This was too grand. Even when Master returned to the mountain, he didn't have this kind of extravagance. While they were in a daze, Lord Taoist Jinyang led a huge crowd to welcome them and greeted them with a smile from afar. Shoujing, you're back. Qin Shi regained his composure and respectfully saluted Lord Taoist Jinyang. Martial Uncle Jinyang. Then he saluted the several nascent Soul Lord Taoists. Martial Uncles. Lord Taoist Jinyang chuckled. No need, no need. Today is the last time you'll call me Martial Uncle. From now on you'll have to call me Senior Brother or Senior Sister. Qin Shi smiled and didn't stand on ceremony. Since he had formed his nascent soul, he was naturally the Grand Supreme Elder and Lord Taoist Shoujing from now on, so he naturally had to change the way he addressed him. After he finished saluting, the core formation cultivators also saluted him. Greetings, Martial Uncle Shoujing. Dozens of core formation cultivators saluted him at the same time. Emo Chenga was shocked by the scene in front of her. Not long ago she had to call these people Martial Uncles, but in the blink of an eye, they had to call Qin Shi Martial Uncle. Although they didn't have to call her Martial Uncle, she and Qin Shi were husband and wife, so they still regarded her as an elder. Of course, the fact that she and Qin Shi had become dual cultivation partners wouldn't be made public until she reported it to Master. Qin Shi was calm. He still smiled and said to these people, no need to be so polite. Then he turned to Lord Taoist Jinyang. Martial Uncle Jinyang, I haven't heard from you for 10 years, so I've made you worry about me. I'm really ashamed. Lord Taoist Jinyang said with a smile. What shame? For the past 10 years,
You were trapped in a dangerous place like Demonic Mountain. Not only did you manage to escape in the end, but you also formed your nascent soul and greatly raised the prestige of Shenqing School. Welcoming you today is what we ought to do. Qinshi was speechless. He'd always been low-key and wasn't good at interacting with people. Lord Taoist Jinyang being so cautious about this matter made him feel uneasy even though he thought highly of him. Lord Taoist Miaoi noticed his uneasiness, so she immediately said to Lord Taoist Jinyang with a smile, "Senior Marshal Brother Jinyang, Shoujing just came back, so I'm afraid he's tired. Why don't you let him rest first? We can talk about this later." "All right." Lord Taoist Jinyang patted his head and said with a smile, "Shoujing, you two can go back to Clear Spring Peak to rest and see your master. Junior Marshal Brother Jinghe will definitely be very happy to see you two back." Lord Taoist Jinyang had always been steady, but today he was so happy that he almost fainted. Seeing this, Mo Tiange was secretly amused. In fact, the point wasn't that Qinshi formed his nascent soul, but that he formed his nascent soul at the right time. Although Shenqing School's nascent soul cultivators weren't as good as Tiandao sects, they were young and had great potential. However, they were always suppressed by Tiandao sect in terms of numbers and strength. Coincidentally, the last time Demonic Mountain opened, Tiandao sect lost a nascent soul cultivator and its reputation declined. Qinshi forming his nascent soul at this time not only greatly raised the prestige of Shenqing School, but also made the number of nascent soul cultivators in Shenqing School finally catch up with Tiandao sect. In that case, everyone would calculate that in another 100 or 200 years, Tiandao sect would lose 1 or 2 nascent soul cultivators, and Shenqing School would fully deserve to be the number 1 sect in the Celestial Pole. The number 1 sect in the Celestial Pole wasn't just a title. The benefits it brought were obvious. First of all, it was attractive to cultivators. Many cultivators would come because of the reputation of the number 1 sect in the Celestial Pole, and they could choose the best disciples. With the best disciples, their development potential would be greater than that of other cultivation groups, and the sect would continue to prosper. As the head Grand Supreme Elder of Shenqing School, Lord Taoist Jinyang had lived for more than 1,000 years and struggled for the sect's affairs for several hundred years. Now that he was in charge and Shenqing School had a chance to become the number 1 sect in the Celestial Pole, how could he not be happy? Then he gave them a few words of encouragement. Even Wu Da and Li Yang, who followed them back, also benefited from the head Grand Supreme Elder's praise. They were so excited that they almost fainted. The two of them felt helpless. After a long time they finally escaped and returned to Clear Spring Peak. As soon as they arrived at Clear Spring Peak, several senior martial brothers and sisters welcomed them with their disciples. They spent some time chatting about some things before they were finally allowed to go to Shanqing Palace. Greetings to Grandmaster Shoujing, Martial Uncle Qingwei. Once they entered Shanqing Palace, a maid immediately came to greet them. Mo Tiange swept her gaze around. Lord Taoist Jinghe wasn't in the hall. "Where's your Grandmaster?" Qinshi asked. Mame bowed and answered on behalf of the maids, "Grandmaster's in the closed-door meditation room." Lord Taoist Jinghe's cultivation level was extremely high, so he wasn't afraid of being disturbed when he cultivated, so he always sat in the hall and cultivated. But now he was in closed-door meditation room because he was seriously injured. Qinshi nodded. "I see. You can go now." "Yes." The maids respectfully saluted him again, then went to do their own things. Qinshi looked back at Mo Tiange. "It seems Master's injuries are really serious. He's actually in the closed-door meditation room." Mo Tiange nodded silently. Ever since she entered the sect, she had never seen Lord Taoist Jinghe enter the closed-door meditation room. Even if he said he wanted to cultivate, he only laid a restriction in the hall. She had only heard of that closed-door meditation room, but she had never been there. "Let's go and take a look first. I hope Master's fine." Qinshi sighed softly and led Mo Tiange out of the hall. After several turns, they finally stopped in front of an inconspicuous stone room. Upon seeing this stone room, Mo Tiange felt this was a real cultivation place for middle-stage nascent soul cultivators. There weren't any unnecessary decorations and there were only many restrictions. Unfortunately, Lord Taoist Jinghe had very few opportunities to use it. Stopping in front of the stone room, Qinshi sighed again and said, "The last time Master entered the closed-door meditation room was when I just entered the sect. At that time, Master hadn't reached the peak of the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, so he often entered closed-door meditation room. Later, when he reached the peak of the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, he didn't have any fated chances, so he cultivated less and tried to break through his mental state. I didn't expect this would happen the next time he used the closed-door meditation room. He put his palms together, quickly made a set of hand seals, and hit the door of the stone room. The stone room moved slightly. After a while, a voice came from inside. Is it Shi'er? The voice sounded a little old. Emo Chenga and Qin Shi looked at each other and saw shock in each other's eyes. Qin Shi answered, Yes, master. Chenga and I are back. After a while, the door to the stone room slowly opened with a loud bang. As the stone door moved, they saw Lord Daoist Jinghe sitting on the stone bed inside the stone room. He was still wearing a golden crown and luxurious clothes, and he still looked noble, but his black hair had turned white. Master. The two of them called out in unison. They walked forward tremblingly, knelt in front of the stone bed, and looked up at Lord Daoist Jinghe. Not only had his hair turned white, but his eyebrows and beard had also lost their color. There were fine wrinkles at the corners of his eyes and forehead, and the muscles at the corners of his mouth had softened. Lord Daoist Jinghe originally looked like he was in his 30s or 40s, but now he looked like he was in his 50s. What kind of injury could have caused him to age so much in 10 years? Master, why did you? Emo Chenga couldn't finish her words. Although this master always annoyed her, she knew he was good to her. In this life, except for her dead mother and second uncle, no one else loved her as much as he did. Seeing her master like this, she felt as if someone was clutching her heart. Lord Daoist Jinghe looked up and swept his gaze over the two disciples kneeling in front of him. He smiled slightly. Don't worry, I won't die. After saying that, his gaze fell on Qin Shi and he showed a gratified smile. You finally formed your nascent soul. Qin Shi looked up, grasped Lord Daoist Jinghe's hand tightly and said hoarsely, Master, how are your injuries? If you have any methods or medicinal pills you need, just tell us. We'll definitely do it for you. Right. Emo Chenga remembered if her master's injuries could be cured with medicinal pills, she didn't lack them at all. Master, tell me. No matter what kind of medicinal pills I need, it's fine as long as there's hope. Alas. Lord Daoist Jinghe sighed softly and stroked her head as if she was still a child. You don't have to be like this. If you need medicinal pills, are you afraid your martial uncle Xinjiang won't get them for me? Although Master is seriously injured, he's fine for the time being. We'll talk about this later. By the way, what do you want to tell Master? Upon hearing this, Qin Shi's eyes reddened. He took Emo Chenga's hand and said cautiously, Master, Chenga and I were trapped on Demonic Mountain for the past 10 years. I formed my nascent soul and became husband and wife with Chenga, so I didn't report it to Master at that time. I hope Master can forgive me. Lord Daoist Jinghe smiled. It was a gentle and kind smile that had never been seen before. He looked at his two most beloved disciples and said softly, I'm more than happy that you two became husband and wife. You don't have to apologize. He looked at Qin Shi and asked, since you've formed your nascent soul and performed dual cultivation with Chenga, the knot in your heart must have been resolved and the demon barrier must have disappeared, right? Qin Shi said in a low voice, Yes. Disciple didn't listen to Master's advice before and made Master worry. Lord Daoist Jinghe nodded with a smile. It's good that you understand. He then turned to Emo Chenga. Chenga, what about you? Do you have any worries or obsessions in your heart now? No, Emo Chenga answered softly. Emo Chenga answered softly, Rest assured, Master. Senior Martial Brother and I have been honest with each other. Those misunderstandings and obsessions no longer exist. That's good. Lord Daoist Jinghe paused for a while and said, You disappeared for 10 years, but Master always believed you'd come back. Today you finally didn't let me down. Both Emo Chenga and Qin Shi felt their hearts tremble. Lord Daoist Jinghe sighed again. You too. Forget it. It's good that you're back. Since you've become husband and wife, you should cultivate well. Master will continue his closed-door meditation. If you have nothing to do, you don't have to disturb me. Master still wants to recover from his injuries and advance to the late stage of the nascent soul realm. Chapter 317. When they came out of Lord Daoist Jinghe's closed-door meditation room, both Emo Chenga and Qin Shi were in a heavy mood. After walking a bit further, they stopped by the railing at the same time. Chenga? Qin Shi called out. He wanted to say something but hesitated. Emo Chenga smiled and sighed. She hugged his waist and said softly, I know what you want to say. Don't worry. If there's anything in the virtual sky world that Master can use, I won't be stingy. Qin Shi was moved when he heard what she said. He said gratefully, "Thank you for saying that." "What are you thanking me for?" Amo Chenga chuckled. "He's your master and also my master. In this world, no one treats me better than him except you." She didn't say anything and just hugged her tightly. He knew that although she had the indifference and decisiveness a cultivator should have, she was also a person who valued relationships. She would always remember who treated her well, and if there was a chance in the future she would pay them back double. They both knew their master's injury was very serious, but it wasn't like there was no way. With the spiritual plants in the virtual sky world and Shi's knowledge of many pill recipes, Martial Uncle Jinyang might not have seen all of those pills. "Later, let's study what medicinal pills can be used to heal master," Amo Chenga said softly. "And she answered. This was the only thing they could do for their master right now. In their divine senses, a foundation-building cultivator was walking towards them, but they didn't move. There were only maids in Shangqing Palace, and these maids didn't dare to disturb them. However, when the man saw them he called out, 'Auntie! Master!' The voice sounded very surprised. Hearing this voice, the two of them hurriedly separated. They saw Yi Jinji standing not far away, looking at them with tears almost falling from his eyes. "Jinji." Yi Jinji wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes and murmured, "You're finally back. I knew you'd definitely come back." Amo Chenga recalled what Wu Da and Liang said happened to him all these years. Seeing his haggard face, she felt sorry for him. Although Jinji wasn't her disciple, she brought him up. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say he was her son. "Jinji, why did you lose so much weight?" She grasped Yi Jinji's pulse, then probed his body with her true aura. However, she discovered that he wasn't injured at all. Furthermore, the spiritual aura inside his body was stable. He was already in the middle stage of the foundation-building realm. Upon hearing her question, Yi Jinji unexpectedly lowered his head and started to cry. Back then, when he lacked experience and his character was a bit weak, he never cried. Today, however, Amo Chenga and Shi were startled. The first thing Amo Chenga thought about was the imprisonment Wu Da and Liang mentioned. During those 10-odd years, did he suffer inhumane torture? Seeing them all of a sudden was why he felt so wronged? Shi sighed and asked, "What made you so sad?" Yi Jinji wiped away his tears, then looked up and said, "Master Auntie, please save Linbua. Please help me save Linbua." Amo Chenga and Shi looked at each other. Both of them were confused. Linbua. Then the two of them remembered that Yi Jinji was trapped by Master Daoist Baiyu precisely because of a woman. Could it be this Linbua? Thinking up to this point, the two of them pondered inwardly. Could it be that Jinji has some sort of relationship with this woman? Yi Jinji said, "Linbua, come with me. I'll tell you slowly." As he led them, Yi Jinji first asked them if they had been all right in the past 10 years. When he learned that they had become husband and wife, he was quite happy. Presumably he had figured it out in the past few years. Then he talked about his experiences in the past few years, which were not different from what Wu Da and Liang said. He was indeed imprisoned by Wanderer Baiyu. Before he left, Shi was worried and gave him several magic talismans to protect himself. During those 10-odd years, Yi Jinji pretended to be incompetent and suffered a lot to numb Wanderer Baiyu. In the end, when Wanderer Baiyu was unprepared, he killed him with magic talismans. After listening to this, Amo Chenga and Shi were quite surprised. Although they both loved Yi Jinji, they always thought he was a little weak and couldn't be a great person. They didn't expect him to have such scheming and perseverance when he was in danger. It seemed it was the right decision to let him go out to gain experience. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to stimulate his potential. The Linbua he mentioned was called Shui Linbua. She was originally from the Eastern Sea. The Eastern Sea had been in chaos for several decades. She was lucky and accidentally found a way to cross Demonic Mountain and come to Kunwu. Her aptitude wasn't good, so she couldn't enter those cultivation sections. As a woman, she struggled to cultivate in Kunwu. Later, she unexpectedly had a fated chance and advanced to the foundation-building realm. She was a foundation-building female cultivator without a backer. Although her aptitude wasn't good, she was a human furnace desired by many cultivators. Wanderer Baiyu took a fancy to her just like that in Kuanzhong City. Coincidentally, on the day Wanderer Baiyu tried to capture her, Yi Jinji passed by and was mistakenly thought to be Shui Linbua's accomplice, so he was captured together with her. Later, Wanderer Baiyu discovered Yi Jinji's identity. Although he knew he had captured the wrong person, he didn't dare to let Yi Jinji go. He was worried that Yi Jinji would hold a grudge against him, but he also didn't dare to kill him. He was worried that Yi Jinji might have left something like a natal lamp behind. If Yi Jinji was tracked down, Wanderer Baiyu wouldn't have a good ending. Therefore he imprisoned Yi Jinji in a place and trapped him with layers of restrictions to prevent others from tracking him. Shui Linbo used some kind of technique to make Wanderer Baiyu mistakenly think she had lost her primordial yin, so she was also imprisoned. She was a loyal person. Seeing that she had implicated Yi Jinji, she protected him all these years, saving him a lot of suffering. Because of this, she suffered more than Yi Jinji. When she escaped, her injuries were already too serious to heal. Unfortunately, after Yi Jinji brought her back, Mo Tiange and Qin Shi weren't there. Lord Taoist Jinghe was seriously injured and in closed-door meditation, so he didn't have time to take care of himself. Although Shui Linbo's life was saved for the time being, no one could cure her injuries. After hearing this, Mo Tiange and Qin Shi looked at each other. Both of them had a plan in their minds. Since the two of them went through trials and tribulations together, they must have developed feelings for each other, which was why Jinji was so excited. Mo Tiange sighed inwardly. It turned out Jinji had also grown up and had a sweetheart. Jinji, Mo Tiange asked, "Don't you have the healing medicinal pills Auntie gave you?" "She didn't get better after taking them." Yi Jinji shook his head dejectedly. "After we were caught, my Qingkuan bag was searched. Fortunately, I was careful and secretly hid some things. Later I killed Wanderer Baiyu, but I didn't get them back. I didn't even get the magic tools Master and Auntie gave me." "It's fine." Qin Shi comforted him. "Master can refine more magic tools for you." Yi Jinji smiled and whispered, "Thank you, Master." After a pause he continued, "Later I finally got in touch with the senior martial brothers of the branch in Kuanzhong City, and they sent me and Linbo back. When Grandmaster heard about it, he specially summoned Martial Uncle Mingjin. Martial Uncle Mingjin went to Kuanzhong City and destroyed the Individual Cultivators Alliance. Mingjin was Lord Taoist Jinghe's third disciple and one of his first 3 disciples. He had been in the core formation realm for more than 200 years and was now in the late stage of the core formation realm. He was skilled and powerful. Although the Individual Cultivators Alliance also had several core formation cultivators, the strongest ones, Taoist Kumu and Tong Tianyun, died on Demonic Mountain, and Wanderer Baiyu was killed by Yi Jinji. The remaining ones were definitely not Mingjin's match. However, although Lord Taoist Jinghe liked to kill, he rarely implicated others. Presumably, Jinji was tortured too miserably, which made him so angry. Grandmaster also gave Linbo medicinal pills, but Linbo's injuries were too serious, so he could only save her life. I know Grandmaster is also seriously injured now, so I don't dare to disturb him again. But Martial Uncle Mingjin and Grandmaster Xianin can't do anything about Linbo's injuries, so I don't know what to do." As they talked, they walked to the door of Mingxin residence. When Mo Tiange saw Jinji opening the restriction, she asked, "Do you live here now?" Yi Jinji answered, "Grandmaster took pity on Linbo and liked her unyielding character, so he let her stay. He said Mingxin residence has calm spiritual aura and is suitable for healing, so he let her live here. In order to take care of Linbo, I usually live here." His expression was sad but calm, and his smiling baby face also looked a bit more stable, which made Mo Tiange feel very gratified. "You've grown up, Jinji." Yi Jinji smiled. "Auntie, I'm almost 80 years old. I should have grown up long ago." Mo Tiange also smiled. Jinji was much taller than her, and now he looked more mature than her. He was indeed no longer the child who always relied on her. Nothing in Mingxin residence had changed. When Mo Tiange moved away, she only took daily necessities with her. Now, even the furnishings hadn't changed. Yi Jinji led them all the way to the lounge, opened the restriction and called softly, "Linbo?" Mo Tiange and Qin Shi followed him inside. In the small lounge, the originally cold jade bed was now covered with a layer of soft fur. A haggard young woman sat cross-legged on the bed with her eyes closed, seemingly healing her injuries. As soon as Mo Tiange saw her expression, she knew her dantian and meridians were injured. Then, she saw that the spiritual aura all over her body was faintly discernible and often scattered. She speculated that her meridians were riddled with holes and couldn't retain spiritual aura at all. She stepped forward, gently took the woman's hand and carefully probed her spiritual aura. Sure enough, her speculation was confirmed. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have believed that a cultivator's meridians were injured to this extent, and her dantian was also damaged. If it weren't for the medicinal power settling in her dantian, she would have died long ago. "Auntie, how is it?" Yi Jinji was a little anxious, but he was afraid of disturbing Shui Linbo, so he asked softly. Mo Tiange sighed and looked at Qin Shi. "It's very serious. No wonder senior martial brother Mingjin and martial uncle Xianin couldn't do anything about it." Upon hearing that, Qin Shi also stepped forward to probe the woman's meridians and also frowned. Looking at their expressions, Yi Jinji couldn't care about anything else and begged, "Auntie Master, please think of a way, think of a way." "Don't worry," Mo Chenga said, "as long as there's a way I'll definitely help you, but you have to cheer up." Upon hearing her comfort, Yi Jinji showed a determined expression. "Auntie, rest assured. No matter what happens in the end, I won't give up hope." Mo Chenga smiled and nodded. Since Jinji was begging her, she would certainly try her best. Moreover, this woman came from the Eastern Sea, so she might be related to Bichuan court. This could also be considered a bit of a connection with her. Chapter 318. At this time, Shui Linbo finally opened her eyes. The first person she saw was Yi Jinji, and she asked softly, "Why are you here again? Aren't you going to cultivate?" There was a hint of reproach in her tone, which reminded Mo Chenga that she used to urge Yi Jinji to cultivate like this, and she couldn't help but smile. Yi Jinji stepped forward, sat down beside her and said softly, "Linbo, my aunt and master finally came back safely. Come and see them." Shui Linbo seemed to notice that there was someone else in the room. Even though Mo Chenga and Qin Shi had restrained their auras, they were, after all, a core formation cultivator and a nascent soul cultivator. She didn't feel anything at all, so her divine sense must have been seriously injured to be so slow. She raised her head curiously, glanced at Qin Shi, and then fixed her eyes on Mo Chenga's face. This made Mo Chenga feel interested. Any woman, whether mortal or cultivator, would look at Qin Shi's face when they saw the two of them. She didn't expect this woman to just glance at him and then stare at her face. Mo Chenga guessed that if this woman didn't have an extremely good state of mind and didn't care about beauty or ugliness, then she must be very scheming. But the next moment, Shui Linbo's reaction overturned her guess. Shui Linbo's skinny, bloodless face was slightly flushed, and her expression gradually became excited. She didn't even care about etiquette and shouted at Mo Chenga, "Fairy, are you a fairy?" Not only were Mo Chenga and Qin Shi stunned, but even Yi Jinji was stunned. He asked her strangely, "What fairy?" "Linbo, what did you say?" Shui Linbo stared at Mo Chenga expectantly and said, 58 years ago, on the coast of the East Sea, an N of the Shui family. Fairy, do you still remember?" Mo Chenga was stunned, and the image of a little girl with a sallow face and hopeful eyes gradually emerged in her mind. 58 years ago, on the coast of the East Sea, she gave a little girl an ordinary cultivation technique and let her embark on the path to immortality. "It's you? You're really a fairy?" Shui Linbo cried tears of joy and then struggled to get up and kneel. "Fairy, thank you for giving me the book. If it weren't for you, there would be no Shui Linbo today. Get up first." Mo Chenga gently raised her hand, and an invisible spiritual aura pushed Shui Linbo back to the bed. He looked at Shui Linbo in disbelief and then at Mo Chenga. "Linbo, is my aunt the fairy who gave you the cultivation technique?" Shui Linbo nodded and said happily, "So this fairy is your aunt? No wonder I always felt that Shenqing School's clothes were very similar to fairies." At that time she was only 8 years old, so she could only vaguely remember many things. She could only roughly remember Mo Chenga's appearance. If it wasn't for the fact that Mo Chenga's appearance hadn't changed all these years and her clothes were still the same as before, she probably wouldn't have recognized her. Mo Chenga originally thought that since this female cultivator came from the Eastern Sea, they might have some kind of relationship, but she never expected that their relationship would be so deep. Back then, it was just something he did casually, but who would have thought that it would create a foundation-building female cultivator today? Moreover, she even had a close relationship with Jinji. It could be seen that there were indeed coincidences in this world. Shui Linbo didn't mention such a trivial matter back then, so Qin Shi also didn't know. Seeing their expressions, he asked Mo Chenga, "What's wrong? Is she your old friend?" Mo Chenga nodded and smiled. "I also didn't expect it to be so coincidental. Back then, I was ordered by my master to travel and arrived at the coast of Donglin. This child has spiritual roots. Back then, her parents begged me, so I gave her a cultivation technique. I really didn't expect her to cultivate to this level." "I see." Qin Shi nodded. Seeing that Shui Linbo didn't know how to address Qin Shi, Yi Jinji introduced, "Linbo, this is my master, Master Taoist Shoujing. Oh no, my master has advanced to the nascent soul realm. He's now Lord Taoist Shoujing." Shui Linbo was startled and immediately became nervous. She had long known that Yi Jinji's identity was extraordinary. Her aunt and master were both core formation cultivators, and they were elders of a big cultivation group like Shenqing School. But she didn't expect Qin Shi to advance to the nascent soul realm so soon. She was originally just an ordinary individual cultivator and rarely saw core formation cultivators. It was only after she came back with Yi Jinji that she saw nascent soul cultivators. Now that she heard the person standing in front of her was a nascent soul cultivator, she was so nervous that she didn't know how to salute. In the end, Qin Shi smiled and said, "You don't have to be nervous. Since you're Jinji's." He paused. There were some things Jinji didn't say and it wasn't good for him to say them clearly, so he said vaguely, "Grandmaster has allowed you to stay, so you're a disciple of our Clear Spring Peak. Just call me as you should." "Yes." Shui Linbo calmed down, saluted and said respectfully, "Greetings to Grandmaster Shoujing." After the salute, Mo Tiange looked at Qin Shi. The two of them had been companions in the virtual sky world for 10 years, and they had long understood many things. Qin Shi understood what she meant, so he said with a smile, "You decide." Mo Tiange also smiled, took out a jade bottle from her robe and gave it to Yi Jinji. "Jinji will find a way to treat Linbo's injury. Before that, give her one pill every 3 days. After taking it, use your spiritual aura to help her heal for 4 hours." "Yes, Auntie." Mo Tiange smiled and said to them, "Your master and I just came back and we still have other things to arrange, so we'll go back first. You can heal and cultivate as usual." "Yes," Yi Jinji said hurriedly, "Auntie, I'll see you out." Mo Tiange raised her hand to stop him. "No need. Just watch over Linbo." She nodded at Shui Linbo with a smile, then left with Qin Shi. After leaving Shangqing Palace, the two of them had their own thoughts. They walked at the same time, one going east and the other going south. After walking about 10 steps, they realized that the other party didn't go with them, so they stopped and turned around, stunned. "Why are you going that way?" After asking at the same time, they were stunned again, remembering that their caves weren't in the same place. The two of them laughed at each other, sighed and walked together. "What should we do?" Qin Shi asked. "Should we go to your cave or mine first?" Mo Tiange said, "Let's go back to our respective caves. We haven't been back for a long time, so we have to deal with things first. We'll contact each other when we're done." Qin Shi thought about it and nodded. "Okay. Remember to send me a summoning talisman." Mo Tiange nodded, and the two of them separated and went back to their caves. Since they were married, they naturally had to live together in the future. The two of them had also discussed this matter. Qin Shi said that his cave looked inconspicuous, but it was actually located on a relatively large spiritual eye in the spirit vein of Clear Spring Peak. He also thought of many ways to enhance the spiritual aura there, and now it was not inferior to Shangqing Palaces. And the most important thing was that it was very secluded and there were few idle people around, which suited their quiet personality. Mo Tiange's current cave was big enough and the spiritual aura was also good, but because it was too big, there would be a lot of people to take care of it. Moreover, the two of them probably wouldn't accept many disciples, so it was better to give it to others and make the best use of it. Mo Tiange thought for a long time and agreed. Her current cave was used by Lord Taoist Shenin before he formed his nascent soul. She only lived there for 2 years, so there weren't many things, so it was convenient to move. But no matter how convenient it was, she couldn't move immediately. She still had to go back and deal with some chores. Fortunately, Xianqing School Steward's Hall was very capable. She had been gone for 10 years, but the cave was still in good condition. The things that needed to be done weren't left behind at all, and the spirit stones used were all deducted from her offerings. She hadn't received offerings for 10 years, but now she received a huge sum of money all of a sudden. When she finished her business and told the steward's hall that she wanted to move to another cave, Qin Shi's summoning talisman arrived. Upon hearing that she wanted to move to Qin Shi's cave, the steward of the steward's hall was so surprised that his jaw almost dropped. Now that he saw Mo Tiange smiling after receiving the summoning talisman, his imagination began to run wild. Mo Tiange was about to reply when she sensed a nascent soul cultivator approaching. Then Qin Shi landed on a flying cloud and walked in. She was surprised. Why did he come? She just received the summoning talisman. Qin Shi smiled. I just remembered that I was going to the spiritual beast pavilion to pick up the spiritual beast I was fostering, so I came out. After answering, Mo Tiange remembered that the steward of the steward's hall was still there, so she said to that person, "All right, I'll leave everything to you. Go do it." Yes. That person's gaze shifted back and forth between her and Qin Shi. He bowed to Qin Shi and was about to leave, but he suddenly remembered that he was no longer a core formation cultivator, so he hurriedly bowed to him and left to handle the matter. Mo Chenga stared at the steward's back and sighed. I guess he must be thinking, this martial uncle Qingwei seems to be well behaved, but I didn't expect her to hook up with Grandmaster Shoujing. She really doesn't show her true colors. She couldn't help but laugh when he said the last sentence in a very funny tone. Seeing him laughing, Mo Chenga couldn't help but laugh as well. She asked, Are you done with your business? She sat down next to her and put his arm around her waist out of habit. He answered, What can happen to my small cave? I just need to ask him a few questions. Mo Chenga nodded. That's true. A small cave has its own benefits. She paused for a moment then asked, What do you think about Master's matter? This question made Shi's smile disappear. He said, This matter can't be rushed. We still have to go see Master in 2 days. How about this? It's not convenient to tell him about the virtual sky world, but we can show Master a few kinds of medicinal pills first and tell him we found a lot of spiritual plants on Demonic Mountain. In this way, Master will believe we have the ability to help him, and then he'll tell us if there are medicinal pills that can treat his injury. Mo Chenga agreed. What about Shui Linbua? This question stumped Shi. To be honest, I've never seen anyone with such a serious injury, and I don't know what to do. There are several medical cultivators in our sect who may know more about injuries. Why don't we ask them? Oh right. His reminder reminded Mo Chenga of senior martial brother Kuang Zhu and his family in Seoul's Retreat Peak. She'd better find time to ask them. These 2 things can't be rushed. Right now there's one thing I have to discuss with you. And? She looked at her and said helplessly, My soul formation is of special significance to the sect, so Martial Uncle Jinyang sent a message saying that we'll hold a soul formation ceremony. In addition, although we've made a blood oath and become husband and wife, we should also hold a dual cultivation ceremony. Don't? Mo Chenga immediately refused. Then, seeing his puzzled look, she lowered her head and explained, You can decide the soul formation ceremony, but can we forget about the dual cultivation ceremony? I really don't like that. She thought for a moment then nodded. I know what you mean. I also don't like that kind of atmosphere. How about this? I'll just tell Martial Uncle Jinyang and make an announcement at the soul formation ceremony. Mo Chenga accepted this idea, so she didn't say anything. Chapter 319. Lord Taoist Jinyang originally planned to organize Shi's soul formation ceremony on a large scale like Lord Taoist Xianyin did last time, but Shi refused. In his opinion, since Xianqing School's reputation was flourishing day by day and Tiandao sect was declining day by day, it would be too domineering and disagreeable for them if they still held a big event like last time. It would be better to keep a low profile. After thinking about it, Lord Taoist Jinyang accepted. Xianqing School had never been a high-profile cultivation group, so it was better for them to be a bit more modest. After Mo Chenga heard what he said, she laughed inwardly. In the end, it was just that he found it troublesome and didn't want to socialize with others. However, this was for the best. At that time, she would have to go out and meet people, and she was also afraid of trouble. Upon learning that Mo Chenga had returned safely, her friends in the school all sent her greetings through summoning talismans. Among them, Luo Fengxue even paid her a visit. Mo Chenga hadn't returned for 10 years, but she heard a lot of gossip from Luo Fengxue. First of all, after junior martial brother Bai Yanfei married senior martial sister Wu, he discovered that although this senior martial sister Wu was gentle and honest, she had a stubborn temper and always tried to control him, which annoyed him endlessly. However, his master, Lord Taoist Jinyang, also protected senior martial sister Wu, leaving him helpless. Speaking of this matter, Luo Fengxue took pleasure in junior martial brother Bai's misfortune. She rudely mocked that junior martial brother Bai deserved it. As for junior martial sister Jiang, she had been living a good life for the past few decades. Her aptitude wasn't bad in the first place. After decades of dedicated cultivation, she actually rushed from the early stage of the foundation building realm to the late stage in one go. This kind of speed was rare in the entire celestial pole. If her cultivation went smoothly in the future, she might be able to form her gold core when she was about 150 years old. As for that junior martial brother Bai, he had yet to reach the peak of foundation establishment. Seeing that junior martial sister Jiang, whom he looked down upon, had caught up to him, he wondered if he regretted it. Regarding this matter, Luo Fengxue said, In my opinion, it's fortunate that junior martial sister Jiang didn't marry him. Otherwise, she wouldn't have the achievements she has today. It's a pity that senior sister Wu has to take care of chores for him every day.
She doesn't even have much time to cultivate. Sigh. Luo Fengxue was very popular among female disciples. Since senior martial sister Wu had a gentle temperament, presumably Luo Fengxue also had a good relationship with senior martial sister Wu. Putting this matter aside, his old friends were all doing well at the moment. During these 10 years, senior martial brother Kuangzhu of Seoul's retreat peak had already formed his gold core. Roughly estimating, the first time Mo Tiange met him was almost 70 years ago. At that time he was already in the late stage of the foundation building realm. His cultivation had been very smooth, and it was only a matter of time before he formed his gold core. Yi Jingwen, on the other hand, was rather pitiful. He had tried once but failed to form his gold core. However, he was still young, only a little over 100 years old, so there was no need to be anxious. They hadn't seen each other for 10 years, so Luo Fengxue spoke for a long time before leaving. In the end, Luo Fengxue mischievously congratulated Mo Tiange. Tiange, I still haven't congratulated you. How did dual cultivation feel? Mo Tiange was embarrassed by her laughter, so she pretended to be angry and said, I still haven't settled the accounts with you. What senior martial brother Qin? You also cheated me. Luo Fengxue burst into laughter. You're the one who thinks that. At most, I just didn't clarify things. I didn't lie to you. Yes. You clearly knew I was deceived, yet you still followed along and hid it from me. Mo Tiange grunted. Alright. Luo Fengxue finished laughing and put her arm around Mo Tiange's shoulder. When martial uncle Shoujing brought you back, I knew the relationship between the two of you wasn't ordinary. But now that things have come to this, I still find it inconceivable. You're really a lucky guy. Mo Tiange also laughed. Similarly, he's also a lucky guy. Luo Fengxue was stunned, but she soon burst into laughter and patted Mo Tiange's shoulder. Alright, since you want to move your immortal's cave, I won't give you any more trouble. I'll head back first. Remember to chat with me later when you have time. Mo Tiange stood up and saw her out. After leaving her immortal's cave, Luo Fengxue flew into the air. When she looked down, she happened to see Mo Tiange welcoming Qin Shi inside. She couldn't help but sigh. It seemed second senior martial sister was going to be sad. However, when she recalled Mo Tiange saying he's also a lucky guy, Luo Fengxue felt that this had nothing to do with aptitude or identity. Perhaps this was where second senior martial sister was inferior to Mo Tiange? Right after Luo Fengxue left, Qin Shi came and immediately asked her, when are you moving? Upon hearing his impatient tone, Mo Tiange smiled. Why are you in such a hurry? It's not like I won't move. Qin Shi said bluntly, I miss you. Although the two of them had long been intimate, Mo Tiange still blushed when she heard this. Alright, the steward's hall has taken care of the matter, so I can go now. Qin Shi was overjoyed. He took her hand and walked away. Let's go then. Hey. Mo Tiange said helplessly, there's still something else. Qin Shi widened his eyes. Didn't you say everything was taken care of? Why is there something else? He looked suspicious. Obviously he thought this was just an excuse. Mo Tiange felt annoyed and amused at the same time. She said, why are you in such a hurry to go back? Those things will be taken care of by the steward's hall. It's not dark yet, so we can go see Master. At the mention of Lord Daoist Jinghe, Qin Shi's suspicious expression disappeared. He asked her, what medicinal pills should we give to Master? Mo Tiange thought for a moment, then said, 9 Revolution Spiritual Heart Pill, Extreme Pure Golden Pill, Tai Pulse Moistening Pill, all of these are fine. In addition, we'll also bring 2 flowerless golden fruits. Flowerless golden fruits wither soon after they're picked. Isn't this a bit hard to explain? Mo Tiange smiled. What's hard to explain? You're already a nascent soul cultivator. It shouldn't be a problem for you to preserve them for a year or so, right? Qin Shi thought for a moment, then nodded. You're right. If we surround the flowerless golden fruits with a large amount of spiritual aura and seal them with special talismans, they won't be preserved for a long time, but they'll be fine for a year or so. After that, the two of them entered the virtual sky world to prepare. There were 2 flowerless golden trees inside the virtual sky world. One of them was bearing fruit, which was useful for cultivators above the nascent soul realm. Mo Tiange was still in the core formation realm, and Qin Shi had just reached the nascent soul realm, so they hadn't picked it yet. These 2 flowerless golden trees were tens of thousands of years old. They were relatively long-lived spiritual trees that bore fruit once every 100 years, and only a few fruits would be born each time. They carefully picked them and put them in jade boxes.
Qin Shi also used some methods to seal the spiritual aura. Soon after, the two of them left the virtual sky world and went to Shanqing Palace together. Lord Daoist Jinghe was still in the closed-door meditation room, and this time, Lord Daoist Jinyang was also present. Upon seeing them, Lord Daoist Jinyang smiled kindly. Shoujing Qingwei, why are you here? The soul formation ceremony hadn't been held yet, but just like Tiange, Qin Shi still called out, "Martial Uncle Jinyang." Okay, you don't have to be so polite. They were only halfway through their greetings when Lord Daoist Jinyang lifted them up. The happiest person about Qin Shi's soul formation was actually Lord Daoist Jinyang. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi stood up then greeted Lord Daoist Jinghe. Master. Lord Daoist Jinghe was in good spirits today, so he said with a smile, "Stand up. I've never seen the two of you so polite before. You're indeed different after getting married." Upon hearing his teasing, Mo Tiange felt relieved. Apparently Master's condition today wasn't bad. He even knew how to joke. Before they arrived, the two nascent soul Dao Lords were talking about something. After Mo Tiange and Qin Shi took their seats, Lord Daoist Jinyang was the first to ask, "Shoujing Qingwei, what brings you here?" Qin Shi answered, "We came to see Master's condition and ask if there's anything we can help with." "Oh, I see." Lord Daoist Jinyang nodded, feeling quite gratified. "You're very considerate. Your Master's injury won't threaten his life, so you don't have to worry about it." "Yes." Qin Shi looked at Lord Daoist Jinghe and asked, "Martial Uncle Jinyang, are there any medicinal pills that can treat Master's injury?" "There are several kinds of medicinal pills, but the spiritual plants they need are really hard to find. Alas, there are very few natural treasures in the world nowadays. Cultivators above the nascent soul realm can hardly take medicinal pills. In the past 10 years, we've only concocted a few healing medicinal pills." Upon hearing this, Mo Tiange and Qin Shi exchanged glances. Qin Shi took out 2 jade boxes from his Chengkuan bag and said to the two of them, "Master, Martial Uncle Jinyang, Tiange and I benefited from a disaster on Demonic Mountain this time. We obtained some treasures. Take a look and see if they're useful for Master's injury." The two Lord Daoists looked quite surprised. They knew Qin Shi's vision. The treasures, he said, must be precious. Lord Daoist Jinyang took the boxes and heard Qin Shi say, "Here are some medicinal pills. We obtained some spiritual plants, and the ones that weren't suitable to be preserved were refined into medicinal pills. Here are 3 flowerless golden fruits. Fortunately, I formed my nascent soul, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to bring them back." Flowerless golden fruits. The two Lord Daoists were shocked and glanced at each other. Lord Daoist Jinyang put the box of medicinal pills aside. Seeing that the jade box was full of spiritual aura, he carefully peeled off the complicated talisman on it. After the box was opened, the two Lord Daoists immediately gasped. Inside the jade box were 3 golden fruits. The skin of the fruits was gold without any impurities. As soon as the box was opened, they smelled a sweet grass-like fragrance. Flowerless golden fruits. Lord Daoist Jinghe took a deep breath and murmured, "Yes, these are flowerless golden fruits. Judging from their color, that flowerless golden tree is at least 10,000 years old, right?" Nascent soul cultivators were nascent soul cultivators after all. They could determine the age of the flowerless golden fruits at a glance. Lord Daoist Jinyang looked for a long time before he sighed and turned to ask Qin Shi, "Where's the flowerless golden tree you found? Do you remember its location?" Qin Shi shook his head and said, "Everything changed after the changes on Demonic Mountain. Tiange and I met it by chance when we were lost. The terrain there was very special. We went back to look for it, but we couldn't find it no matter what. A place like Demonic Mountain couldn't be speculated with common sense, so Qin Shi wouldn't be exposed even if he lied casually." Sure enough, Lord Daoist Jinyang didn't doubt him. He just sighed regretfully. Qin Shi asked again, "Martial Uncle Jinyang, is this thing useful for Master's injury?" Lord Daoist Jinghe answered with a smile, "Of course it's useful. Cultivators below the nascent soul realm can't bear the spiritual aura of flowerless golden fruits, but for nascent soul cultivators, 1 fruit is equivalent to several years of rest." Not bad. Lord Daoist Jinyang looked at the 3 fruits with eyes full of reluctance. It was also rare for him to see such spiritual objects. "With these 3 fruits, your Master's recovery time can be reduced by at least 30 years. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi glanced at each other. They were very happy. "Martial Uncle Jinyang, take a look at these medicinal pills again. Are they useful for Master?" You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel.
We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.